Took him long enough. Honestly, what held him up?
You had him on standby. You took steps in advance. Did you anticipate this?
I wanted to act cool and tell him this was all as I had predicted. But, unfortunately, I hadn't expected any of this. No, nothing like that. I just believed in Telmam. No, I believed in everyone. It had been a close call. I had been certain this crisis would be my last. But saying I believed in everyone was pretty hard-boiled, right?
Would you stop doing that? Say something earlier. Sir!
Aha. The water membrane shifted, forming a ball that encompassed all the dragons. Slowly, the ball condensed. The dragons writhed and screamed, but the pressure continued to build. Green blood mixed with the clear water, and I heard the awful sounds of flesh being crushed and bones being shattered. It was a grotesque move for someone with a title like Counter Cascade.
What's that?
I looked where the knight was pointing. Far below us, in a street that had been emptied out when the dragons arrived, were Telm and Ketchakaka. Standing opposite them was a figure in a fox mask, just like what we had seen at the gathering.
That's a fox. We need to help those two.
I grabbed her before she could jump out the window. Calm down, Chris.
Maya, what are you doing?
Think about it. I want to help too, but we have people we need to protect. What a shame. No, really, I want to help fight. But they'll be fine if Telma's there. Foxmask waved his hand and a large Neginata appeared in his grip. But Telm didn't panic. He moved his hands with bold movements just like a level 7 would. It was as though he was making the world itself his ally. The water bubble filled with crushed dragons moved like a living organism and headed for Foxmask. He evaded the deluge, but it just chased after him. The ground shook and houses were crushed as if they had been made from nothing more than paper. Telm truly was of the same class as the Abyssal Inferno. But something else was on my mind. Foxmask wasn't a phantom. His presence was nothing like that of the phantom I had met. It's fake? My ability to detect presences was on par with the average civilian, which is to say, I had almost no ability to discern a presence. But that phantom had been extraordinary enough that even I could detect it. What did this mean? Was it my imagination? I was, to be fair, looking at Foxmask from a distance. The rumbling faded and silence returned. Foxmask was nowhere to be seen. The magus who had just wrought so much destruction turned to me and shrugged. I went down and reconvened with the two magi.
I know you had mentioned the possibility of dragons, but I must say, level 8S sure can be slave drivers.
Ketchakaka laughed. Though he had called me a slave driver, Telm looked like he hadn't even broken a sweat. Anyone of a lower level couldn't have stayed so calm after using a major spell like he had. Even his movements were brisk, making it all the harder to believe he was multiple times my age.
Good job, Counter Cascade. Did you slay the fox?
I merely did my duty. As for the fox, I felt I hit something but found no corpse. That foe was just as elusive as their name would suggest.
That was very hard-boiled of him. Of course it was. Anyone with a brain could tell that he should be in charge of our group. What a terrible opponent we had if that hadn't been enough to kill them. It was looking more and more like I would have to grovel, just like last time. How exciting.
Were there any fatalities?
No. Some people have been critically injured, but no deaths. If the 1,000 Tricks had deployed that barrier earlier, we might not have had any injuries.
Did he really think I made that wall of light? No. It's nothing.
What was that? Quit it with the half sentences.
No, it's just, I didn't think the Imperial Guard would lose to dragons.
Whoa, what was that?
Sorry. I'm really sorry. As bad as I felt, I couldn't tell him that the rest of my party was following us. After all, there was a member limit. I was clearly breaking the rules.
So, what did you mean when you said fake, sir?
What's this?
Well, looking at that fellow in the fox mask, he said it was fake. Sir!
Did I say that? Telm, Ketchakaka, Franz, the Emperor. They all looked at me appraisingly. Chris wasn't mistaken, but I had just been imagining things when I said that. I can say with confidence that I had terrible eyesight. Chris grabbed me by my clothes and shook me.
Quit bullshitting.
But that didn't change the fact that I had just been imagining things. Telm glanced around at the members of our group.
Well, it's no matter. Our current objective is protecting His Imperial Majesty. Those frigid dragons were clearly being manipulated, seeing as they headed straight for us. Let's just consider ourselves lucky nobody was killed. Because somebody surely will be if this continues. No matter how capable the Thousand Tricks is, we can't watch every angle.
Nor can we afford to miss the conference. However, Your Imperial Majesty, I'm of the same opinion as the Counter Cascade. And that's to say nothing of the fact that the criminal got away. With Your Imperial Majesty's safety at stake, we must change our approach.
Hitch, hold on. The Emperor looked at me with shock. Franz and Telm also turned my way. Telm's suggestion was very reasonable, and Franz's proposal made perfect sense for someone in his position. But I knew something they didn't, and that was that Citri had been behind this incident. I even had an idea as to how she had brought the dragons in, the same monster-luring potion she had used during our vacation. Putting aside the matter of Fox Mask, if the Emperor ended up missing the conference, that would make Citri a terrorist. She was a good girl. She had just missed the mark a bit this time. Normally, she would never make something like this happen. I was sure she would never do it again if I had a talk with her. I held a hand to my aching stomach. We should continue. To retreat here would be admitting defeat. Those frigid dragons were nothing more than a light jab. As you saw, nobody was killed, and I'm sure we have enough muscle on our side.
Are you serious? Let me remind you, Fox is capable of manipulating dragons.
If my supposition is correct, there won't be any more dragons. I'm certain of it. Not a single one. Franz's eyes bulged.
What?
As for those foxes, there's a secret to dealing with them. Next time they show themselves, it'll be their last. I'd bring them down with my groveling techniques that now had multiple years of evolution behind them. Not to mention I would have Telm with me this time. With a knowing look in my eyes, I gave him a smile that was hard-boiled and dauntless. He looked back at me with suspicion. Just what was happening? The black-clad man stood alone in the room, a shadow falling over his face. He reflected on the attack that had just been carried out. The summoned dragon brood had been annihilated by the might of the Counter Cascade, but the man had anticipated that. The relic couldn't summon specific varieties of dragons, which left room for a wide range of creatures that might appear. If you had a group containing a level 7 and 8, they would be capable of taking on any sort of dragon, not just frigid dragon. And so, this outcome was just fine. The man had been surprised to see such a rare variety and so many at once, and he hadn't expected the knights to not have a single fatality among their ranks. However, this was fine as well. In fact, the man was glad to have gotten a glimpse of the mysterious powers of the Thousand Tricks. But the man hadn't anticipated what came after that. To think that the Thousand Tricks would advocate for the journey to continue. It made no sense at all. They were defending the emperor of a large nation. Anyone would cancel a journey after an incident like this. That, of course, had been the opinion of Franz and the Counter Cascade, and the man agreed with them. It was hard to imagine that someone who had attained the rank of level 8 couldn't understand their way of thinking. And yet, the Thousand Tricks had argued against their proposal. His stance hadn't been affected in the slightest by a dragon attack. Could that be the product of overconfidence? Or perhaps something else? The man thought back to the way the Thousand Tricks had behaved when he fended off the dragons. It had been for only a moment, a small gesture that nobody else had noticed. He had seen the dragons, held them off, then gave a thumbs up to the man as he watched from a distance. It had almost been like he had been commending a job well done. To see through the ruse all the while fighting off the dragons was impressive, but it didn't explain the gesture. And then he advocated not changing the plan. If anything, this worked in the man's favor. Within the imperial capital, the emperor was untouchable. Even if you managed to reach him within that stalwart castle, Roderick himself was formidable with a blade. But if he was outside, where his defenses were thinned, then things were different. For the man, who had the abnormal power to lure in dragons, killing the emperor was within the realm of possibility. Thus, he had no need to worry. He would be just fine if he slowly ground down the Zebrutians. But the man was unnerved by just how much things were going his way. It was like he was being told to just go right for the emperor's throat. What are you thinking, Thousand Tricks? The man had carried out many difficult tasks before. He had also failed at times and even escaped death by the narrowest margins. But he had never been this shaken. The 1,000 Tricks had said there wouldn't be any more dragons, but he was wrong. It was true that dragons' reprisal required large amounts of mana, and the man didn't know how many successive uses he could withstand. But that was no reason to refrain from using the relic. The man clutched his head and whispered to himself in a soothing voice. He just needed to proceed as always. He just needed to think only of his objective and loyally carry out his duties.
What are you thinking, sir? We should talk about these things. We should talk about these things.
Now, calm down.
And not only that, why are you on my horse again? Get off, sir!
Now. The morning after the dragon attack, we departed the town. Sharing a horse with Chris, I clung to her back. We were serving as the caravan's rear guard. They must have been on high alert because the carriages were moving at a slower pace than they had yesterday. The weather was so nice, it was almost hard to believe we had been assaulted by dragons the previous night. Even the horses seemed to be trotting along with good spirits. I was perfectly comfortable. Citri, things are just fine as they are. Thinking about her reminded me of something Tino had previously said about white crows. Maybe she was right. Next time I saw her, I'd give Citri a thorough lecture. I had put Telm in the front of the caravan for today. I had known he was strong, but he had far exceeded my expectations with the extraordinary magic he had displayed. He might even have been stronger than Lucia. If Telm was with us, this quest was in safe hands, no matter what came our way. I'd have to give my thanks to the Abyssal Inferno.
And you weren't even right about the frigid dragons. Sir, their weakness wasn't fire. Was that some sort of joke?
Now.
Where's your motivation? Why can't you be serious? Like when you put up that barrier. Sir, if you were, then...
Yeah, huh? Let This Grieving Soul Retire by Chukakaj, cast by Artale Studio. If you are interested in creating your own audiobooks, please check out our website at artale.ai. Now, enjoy the story. I let out a big yawn, set to the background track of Chris's scolding. The day before had been a real whirlwind, but I didn't let that get to me. There's nothing as easy as an escort job when you're surrounded by powerful companions. I felt a little bad about receiving the flying carpet when I wasn't really doing anything. Just like yesterday, the carpet was floating along behind us. He was a real chill fellow when nobody was riding him. Holding tight onto Chris, I turned around and froze. My carpet, he wasn't there. I looked around, but saw no sign of him. Hey, Chris! Stop the horse!
What happened?
We came to a halt. With some trouble, I dismounted and squinted. My precious carpet was gone. Nowhere to be seen. I hadn't even taken him for a proper ride. The flying carpet was still a relic. Even unruly ones like him didn't just disappear on their own. The carriages continued to move, leaving us behind. It seemed they hadn't noticed that we had stopped. I didn't have any firepower to offer, and our strongest member Telm with the carriages, so I figured it would be fine if I stepped away for a bit. Just a bit. I wasted no time making a decision. Chris, we're going back.
Did I hear that right? What about our job? Sir?
We're searching for my carpet. My precious carpet. It shouldn't be that far behind. I'm sure we can find it. Don't worry, I'm sure it won't take long. And the carriages are moving slowly, so we should be able to catch up. If we lose the carpet, then I'll have accepted this job for nothing.
I'm not too sure what's going on, but it's not a bad way to train. This is what adventuring's all about.
Having fun, Luke.
Luke's sword was a well-balanced straight sword. It was about 1 meter long, had a wide blade, and weighed very little. However, the most distinguishing aspect of this weapon was that every part of it was made from wood. Naturally, this meant it had no sharpened edge. But that didn't stop Luke from proudly pointing his sword to the cloudless heavens above. The tip was aimed straight at a small silhouette in the sky. That silhouette belonged to a green dragon, a common variety named for their variant scales. But a common variety of dragon was still a dragon, and therefore wasn't a recommended target for anyone below level 6. The dragon showed no interest in the humans below, and flew almost as though something were urging it along.
With all the dragons we've seen, I'm more than willing to bet some other forces at work here.
Unless I'm mistaken, green dragons don't live around here. I suppose they must have flown here from somewhere far away.
Outside of a handful of varieties, dragons were all exceptionally skilled flyers. It was one of the reasons they dominated the other creatures of the land. Sometimes they could even exceed the speed of sound, something no mere human could hope to keep up with. Resting on her brother's shoulder and swinging her legs, Liz shrugged her shoulders. She always enjoyed a bit of bloodshed, but even she was getting tired.
How many does this make? Should there really be so many dragons out here? What's drawing them in? Who knows? Monster lures don't have much effect on dragons. I can't think of anything that might do this besides some sort of relic.
They had just spotted a dragon in the sky, but nobody was at all nervous about it. Just like the previous day, they were clearing the road for the caravan. In just a few hours, they had encountered 5 dragons.
Foxes, maybe? Citri didn't dwell on it and instead turned towards Luke. Krai said there won't be any more dragons, so you know what that means.
Luke nodded. Taste my blade, he roared. School of Luke throwing technique, fleeting glint.
The dragon sped up, almost as if challenging him, and Luke hurled his blade. Liz made a comment about the oddity of a swordsman throwing this weapon, but that didn't change the fact that his blade flew true and straight like a comet. Without losing any of its initial velocity, the blade was about to catch up to the green dragon when it burned up just before impact.
Damn it, burned again. What am I lacking? Lucia, another sword.
Maybe you lack motivation?
And Sem grunted in agreement.
Don't just say what comes to mind. Lucia scolded, and in her hand she formed a small whirlwind, carrying bits of glimmering ice. Hailstorm!
In an instant, the whirlwind expanded into a tornado that could reach the sky. Most spells involving nature had large-scale effects, and Lucia specialized in ice magic. The ice storm expanded faster than the dragon could fly, flattening the surrounding area in the process. Shortly after, there was a large thump that shook the ground. The dragon had crashed to the ground after being lacerated by the storm.
No backbreaking effort today, I guess. It seems like whatever is calling these dragons can't call very powerful ones.
What of the materials?
Let's leave them. It's a waste, but this is too much for us to carry.
I'm still enjoying myself, but it's hard to be grateful for excess prey even if they're dragons. I lost my sword, and it'd be easier if they all just came at once instead of one at a time.
Ansem grunted. Citri gazed regretfully at the mythical beast. Every part of a dragon was a valuable material, but they had no means to carry all that.
City, there's a big-ass horde of monsters headed our way. What do we do? Horde? Are they dragons? Liz squinted. She saw mythical beasts and sapient monsters running like it was the end of the world. I think I see some terror dragons. As for the horde of monsters, I see orcs, goblins, and a bunch of other stuff.
Terra dragons were one of the few dragons that couldn't fly. Their wings had devolved, but they made up for it with their large bodies and powerful attacks. They were at the heels of what seemed to be a bunch of terrestrial monsters. Coexistence between dragons and monsters was impossible. Standing at the top of every ecosystem they existed in, dragons were the nemesis of every creature besides humans.
Let's go. I'm sure my sword will connect now. It's time. Time for me to cut.
Holding a sword freshly minted by Lucia, he rolled up his sleeves. Without stopping for a moment, the horde of monsters headed straight for the Grievers. However, it would be more accurate to say they were headed for what was far behind them, the Emperor and his retinue.
Citri pondered the situation for a moment before clapping her hands together. Luke, please cut only the dragons. I'd like you to leave the monsters unharmed.
What's that? What for?
Krai said he has no use for dragons. He said nothing about monsters.
He had specifically said dragons. This most likely meant that he wanted anything but dragons. Citri had known him a long time, so she knew how to understand what he was thinking, even when he didn't say it aloud.
Luke nodded, entirely convinced. I see now. Okay, cutting with discretion, is that it? Just the dragons. Got it. I can do this. Just the dragons. I cut only the dragons. I think this'll be fine training. I can hardly wait.
How confounding. The curse should have been successfully cast. Yet no dragons were appearing. Riding in a carriage with some other guards, the man furrowed his brow as he considered the bizarre situation.
The journey had been as easy as one could possibly want. The sky was without a single cloud or sign of incoming dragons. Last night's events had been outside the norm, but no dragons appearing at all was a first for the man. The relic simply called dragons to its position, so you couldn't expect immediate results. This, however, was far too much of a delay to ignore. The man made sure not to let his concern show on his face. The caravan was already on edge after the previous night's incident, and they likely suspected a traitor was among their ranks. And there was no point in fretting when the man had no way of even confirming if the curse had worked or not.
The 1,000 Tricks wasn't anywhere close. He had volunteered to be the rear guard, which put him far from the Emperor's carriage. It made no sense. If he was going to guard the Emperor, it was only natural that the 1,000 Tricks stay close by his side. He wouldn't be able to get too close so long as the Emperor was surrounded by knights, but that was no reason to volunteer to stay in the back.
In this current state, the Emperor was defenseless. Those incompetent knights had yet to realize that the man was their enemy. Even without relics, the man could fight. He wasn't about to do anything impulsive, but he believed he could potentially kill the Emperor so long as he was willing to throw his own life away in the process.
Among the gods, he was only outmatched by the 1,000 Tricks and the Counter Cascade. All he had to fear was the preterhuman artifices of the 1,000 Tricks, whose behavior the man found incredibly suspicious.
Monsters! A horde of monsters is coming! It's massive. All units, prepare to protect the carriage.
What was that? Impossible! The curse was only meant to draw in dragons. This wasn't his work. He turned around. The hunter assigned to the rear guard was nowhere to be seen.
Honestly, words fail me. What were you thinking? Crit making more work for Lucia.
Sorry. I said, clutching my precious. Now that it was out of mana, it was nothing more than a normal carpet. I was entirely to blame for this mishap. Keeping tabs on a self-propelled relic's mana charge should be second nature for all relic users. If Mathis found out about this, I was sure to get a loud and angry lecture.
I accompanied you because I saw how worried you were, sir. But this was all because you lost your carpet. I feel like an idiot, sir.
Forgive me.
Only once you've lost that grin, sir. What if something had happened to the caravan while we were away?
How could she blame me for grinning? It was a perfectly normal reaction to reclaiming my carpet. I don't feel good saying it, but I'd probably do the same thing if it happened again. It's not like the Emperor was safer with me around or anything. I had told Citri not to send any more dragons, and it was unlikely any would come of their own accord. If they did continue to come, then the only reasonable conclusion would be that the Emperor was cursed. Don't worry. I've said it before, but nothing's gonna happen. We traveled at a brisk pace and caught up with the caravan in only 10 minutes, and when we did, we found the carriages surrounded by monster corpses. Upon noticing us, Franz glared at us like a demon. It appeared that something had indeed happened. Depending on how you looked at it, you could say I made the right or wrong decision to go get my carpet. I might have been an expert at apologies, but I had still committed the worst sin a hired guard possibly could. Without saying anything, I had separated from my client, and they had been attacked in my absence. This could harm my reputation enough to result in my level being lowered. Even Chris was frozen still. I hadn't taken my entire group with me, but as the leader, it wasn't going to be easy coming up with an excuse for my actions. I'd probably be killed if I told the truth and explained to them that I had gone back to fetch my carpet. Tell knit his brow, unless I was mistaken. Ketchikaka wore a cloudy expression. Calm down, Krai. Now's not the time for panicking. Be calm. You've survived plenty of trials so far, you can survive this one too. I lightly patted Chris's stiff back and got off the horse. Even now I was perfectly comfortable. Was anyone wounded?
What gives you the right to ask that? No wounded.
He was awfully level-headed for a noble. The average one would have absolutely bellowed at me. But more important was the news that there were no wounded. Looking around, the signs of battle suggested it had been a one-sided one. Nothing shocking about that when we had a Magus, who could wipe out a brood of frigid dragons in an instant. No horde of monsters was going to be a threat while he was around. This was no time for relief, but I was relieved. If nobody had been hurt, maybe it was still possible I might be forgiven? Maybe, or maybe I was being delusional. I won't do it again, so please forgive me. Franz stomped over to me, stopping right in front of my eyes. Everyone looked at me with critical gazes.
As much as I'd like to settle this right now, we are unfortunately stopped in the middle of the road. When we get to town, I expect a thorough explanation from you.
So what am I going to do about this?
What will you do? Human weakling? I have no special attachment to this job or your hierarchies, but my pride demands we don't get sacked.
Honestly, I didn't think there was anything we could do. Bringing Telm had been my decision, and he had eliminated the frigid dragons. I was confident that decision would keep me from being thrown in jail, but this would be a blow to my honor. However, I didn't really care about honor, nor did anyone in Grieving Souls for that matter, and a level demotion would actually be welcome. But there was just one issue: the carpet. Would they want it back? Would they let me buy it off them?
And Lucia even told me to look after you.
Dee, don't worry. You're only here because I dragged you along. I'll do what I can to support you.
Just shut up, sir!
Okay. A few knights had been diverted from the Imperial Guard and were keeping an eye on us. I didn't plan on going anywhere, but I had lost any faith they had in me. I'm sure it didn't help that Perfect Vacation didn't look like the useful relic it was. In retrospect, I think they had a lot of reasons for not trusting me. It's not like I had wanted to pull away from the caravan, but that wouldn't mean much to them. Surrender seemed like the best option at this point. As we rode along, I felt more and more like a man awaiting his execution. But then the caravan came to an abrupt halt. Was it another attack? Maybe the Emperor really was cursed if he was getting attacked so much. I knew I should have no to this. No. I need the flying carpet.
Get off! Hurry, sir!
I didn't hear any sounds of combat, so it must not have been an attack. Franz left the Emperor's side and came over to us. His face was grave but lacked the rage it contained earlier.
It's a dragon corpse. There are clear marks showing it didn't die of natural causes.
What's with all the dragons? Has the Empire become dragon territory? Maybe we should relocate the capital.
His Imperial Majesty requests your assessment of the situation.
I'm not an expert or anything.
Just come already!
I was a little disturbed by the amount of faith placed in me for my level. Did every level 8 get this sort of deference? Franz dragged me to the front of the caravan, where a corpse was resting in the middle of the road. The color of its hide informed me that it was a green dragon. The first dragon Grieving Souls had ever killed was a green dragon, but that was a long time ago. It was a fair bit larger than one of our specially built carriages, but its body was battered, and its wings had been shredded. Telm felt the surface of the dragon and frowned.
If hunters did this, then I have to question why they abandoned the corpse. Could this be the work of another mythical beast?
It was killed quite recently. I believe it was likely killed by ice magic, and while flying at that.
There's no ice magic that could bring down a dragon so easily, or so I'd like to say. There are traces in the air of a large-scale spell being used. This is most likely the work of a human. Sir.
Kichachaka laughed to himself. I was amazed. So this was what hunters looked like. What were those traces in the air that Chris mentioned? Could she see them? All I could tell was the thing before us was a dead dragon. I folded my arms and nodded, impressed by their work.
Care to offer your own assessment?
I'm not quite sure how to put it, but I don't think we need to dwell on this.
What?
They had no way of knowing this, but once again, I was aware of something that they weren't. Lucia had done this. My younger sister, Lucia Rogier, was an expert when it came to wide-area offensive spells. Even in Grieving Souls, each member had their own role to play. There were occasions when we found ourselves surrounded by dozens of monsters. The task of intercepting those monsters fell on the shoulders of Lucia, the avatar of creation. As her skills developed, so did the potential radius of her spells. She already reached incredible heights, as we had seen back when she turned a whole town into frogs. Lucia was particularly fond of ice magic, so I was certain this was her doing. I had heard that lately. Grieving Souls' favorite tactic was for Lucia to slow a target with ice and then let the other members move in. Wallowing in my uselessness, I put on a hard-boiled front. Don't ask. So they went on ahead. Looks like someone can't help but worry about her brother.
Could this be your doing?
Of course it wasn't. What sort of person did he take me for? How could I have gone ahead and off to Dragon when I was with the caravan for most of the trip? Telm looked at me with suspicion, but then I had a divine revelation. Could I use this as an excuse for my absence? It'd be a lie, but I was technically the leader of Grieving Souls, so maybe I could get away with saying their power owes my power. Well, I won't say you're wrong.
That's not an answer.
The human walking was with me the entire time. He didn't do a thing, sir.
You're right. Totally right. But even still, Chris sure was an honest person. I just gave a pathetic smile and shrugged my shoulders. Whatever the case, there's no need to dwell on something as minor as this cadaver. Whatever happened, the fact is that it's dead. Let's hurry up and get to the next town. However, the road was littered with dead dragons. It was like a gallery of corpses. All I could do was give a chagrined smile as the abnormal scenery rolled by. There were shredded monsters and a dragon cut clean in two. This was probably the work of Luke. There was a red dragon that was clearly dead, but showed no external wounds. This was probably the work of Citri. There was a wyvern whose head had been twisted off. This was probably the work of Liz and Ansem. Even Franz and his proud knights looked sickened by the horrific sights. Telm was unperturbed, but he clearly had something he wanted to say. It was possible he had figured out that allies of mine had done this. He had nothing to worry about because those allies were my childhood friends. Look at all these dead dragons. Maybe it really is time to get out of Zeebrugge. Franz Argman froze when he heard what the Emperor had to say.
You want the hunters by your side?
This had been the most abnormal escort job he had ever experienced. There had been the attack by Fox, the dragon brood, the monster horde, and now the inexplicably slaughtered dragons. They had made it through another day, but the knights were getting tired. Roderick looked as unshakable as ever, not a hint of fatigue on his face. But that was just because he kept it hidden. The exhaustion felt by a man bearing the weight of a major empire no doubt dwarfed that felt by France.
This was humiliating. The Zero Order had long been in charge of protecting the Emperor, and had never ceded that duty to anyone else. But the Emperor's reasoning wasn't beyond Franz. The Imperial Guard were some of the best out there, but there was still a clear gap between them and the Counter Cascade. That level 6 Kachikak and Chris were both very likely better magi than those in the Imperial Guard. Without them, everyone might have died to the frigid dragons. You speak true, your Imperial Majesty. The Counter Cascade is powerful and accomplished in his field. However, the actions of that man, the 1,000 Tricks, are clearly unnatural. I worry that placing him at your side may be a premature decision. Franz was put off by the 1,000 Tricks. The level 8 wasn't hard to believe that his powers were exceptional, but his behavior defied comprehension. Franz had come across plenty of arrogant hunters, but something about this one was different. Frankly, Franz considered him the sort of hunter that normally nobody would want anything to do with. Not to mention, there were the rumors of the trials he liked to inflict on his clan members.
You're quite right, but that man's innocence has already been proven by Tears of Truth.
If these attacks had all been the work of Fox, then it meant they knew the route the caravan was taking. The most likely explanation was that the caravan had a traitor in its midst. If that were true, then the only two people whose innocence could be guaranteed was Franz and the 1,000 Tricks. How ironic that that inscrutable hunter was the man Franz could trust the most. When they discovered the dragon corpse, the 1,000 Tricks had been calm and collected, whereas even the Counter Cascade had been grimacing. Something about that was strangely reassuring to Franz. The means by which he might have done so were unclear, and he never even claimed to do it. But if that unfathomable man had indeed somehow slain those dragons, then Franz couldn't remove him from the guard no matter how much he wanted to. Franz was the leader of the Zero Order, the Emperor's personal guard. He would never prioritize his pride over the safety of the Emperor, and if the 1,000 Tricks were to be kept nearby, Franz could personally keep an eye on him. Going by that reasoning, his subordinates were also likely to accept this decision.
The eyes of Roderick at Tolm Zeebrugge were clear. Franz almost thought he could see straight to his heart. The safety of the Emperor took priority above all else. Franz couldn't keep his stress from showing on his face, but he could keep his emotions from controlling him.
As you wish, Your Imperial Majesty.
Telmapoklus sat in his inn room. He thought deeply about the situation thus far and reached a bitter conclusion. He had had his suspicions, but the recent developments gave him the evidence he needed. He was all but certain that the Thousand Tricks was a member of Nine-Tailed Shadow Fox. Not only that, Telm suspected him to be a member of the upper echelons. The Counter Cascade didn't know how that man had deceived Tears of Truth, but he had to confirm his suspicions. At least, Telm and Kichakaka are fine.
I thought you had just eaten unused nuts. This shouldn't be possible. And what of your mana?
My throat was dry. I tried taking a few deep breaths, and doing so helped me grasp the situation. Huh? Could it be? Did my magic talents bloom overnight? Chris would often tell me that because Lucia was my sister, I could develop some skills if I just applied myself. Lucia, as a reminder, is not related to me by blood. Had things finally started to change for the better? I heard the Imperial Frog Princess ribbiting. If my talents had bloomed, it was too early to be celebrating. Frog Franz and the Imperial Frog Guard let out a symphony of protests. Only the Frog Emperor maintained his solemn dignity. His frog form had golden skin, a remnant of his human visage. So these are my true powers, I told myself as I wore a nihilistic smile, all in an attempt to avoid the reality before me. Looks like I'm the better of the two siblings. Mana means nothing to a true magus. Total bullshit, by the way.
Is now the time for that?
The magus from the Imperial Guard stammered. She seemed to be panicking, which was a perfectly normal reaction to seeing all your comrades turned into frogs. But hadn't the Emperor been wearing a safety ring? Had I bypassed it? Many a true word is spoken in jest, as they say. Didn't I tell you? My control over the spell is still lacking.
Revert them! Revert them this instant!
What a great idea that was. The only issue was that I had no idea how. Reverse! I screamed, but nothing happened. I must have been really fretting, because then I had an auditory hallucination.
That's impossible!
It sounded like Lucia. The situation was bleak. At this rate, I was going to be charged with the unprecedented crime of regicide via frog spell. I desperately tried to remember how we undid the spell last time. Oh, that's right. Now I remember. We just squashed them. With much ruckus, the frogs were all turned back to humans. Fortunately, it appeared the spell I had cast was the same as Lucia's. Perhaps one glance had been all my instincts needed to process and learn the spell. If my magic talents had finally awakened, it was happening a bit too fast.
After squashing a number of frogs, Franz pointed an angry finger at me. His face was red with rage. Your Imperial Majesty, I cannot bear this man's insolence any longer. He needs to be removed at once. Even without him, the Imperial Guard and the Counter Cascade are more than enough to protect you.
Oh, good idea!
Be quiet. What are you trying to do?
I understand your anger, Franz, but please calm yourself.
No, it's fine. Get rid of me. I don't want to be here anyways. Look, even Princess Marina is afraid of me.
This man turned you and the Imperial Princess into frogs. He insisted that it would be disrespectful if he were to crush you two, and forced the task onto me, saying it would be fine if I did it. But I couldn't disagree more.
You did what needed to be done, and it was I who told the Thousand Tricks to cast the spell.
I refuse to believe that that was the only way. This man is making a mockery of the Empire.
And no, I'm not.
Silence? You're not even dressed appropriately for this job.
Franz was losing his mind, but I don't see why he had to bring up my shirt again. He stood directly in front of me, looking down at my face. I looked up and saw a vein bulging on his forehead.
Once this is over and we've returned to the capital, I'll make sure you pay for this.
I'm really sorry that this happened. And I did warn you that I can't control the spell very well.
Quiet. You shouldn't have been able to use magic at all after eating something that hinders mana manipulation.
If they understood that, yet still made me use the spell, then all I could do was shrug. In a mocking gesture, the carpet did the same. What a cute fellow.
You've also upset her Imperial Highness.
And no, she was always like, Never mind. Chris was also completely pissed off. The blood had drained from her face, and she was trembling like she was struggling to contain her anger. I said I was sorry. Even I hadn't expected I would actually cast a spell.
Nonetheless, this is no time to be fighting among ourselves. The Tears have already certified the 1,000 Tricks' innocence. I think Marina is much safer with him around.
Wow. You'll forgive just about... didn't mean to say that. Franz let out a voiceless scream. Marina hung her head, but it looked like I hadn't been fired just yet. What a lenient fellow the Emperor was. The moment we returned to my room, Chris gave me an earful. I guess not everyone could be as forgiving as the Emperor.
I can't believe you! Do you have it out for me? Sir!
Now. I'm just glad the spell was undone.
Was there a possibility that it wouldn't be undone?
Oh, maybe a 5% chance. Chris visibly recoiled. As I thought about it, I realized my blossoming talents meant I might be able to go on adventures with the rest of Grieving Souls. The thought of that made me very happy. I noticed a pitcher on the desk. Here, calm down and have a sip of water. Oh, why don't I turn this water into wine? It shouldn't be too hard if I can turn people into frogs.
That's impossible!
The Lucia in my head refuted the idea. I cleared my throat and heeded her warning. I could never go against my sister. Just kidding. Of course I can't turn water into wine. Orange juice, however. I'm only joking. Magic's got its limits.
After all my help, you just make fun of me. That's it, I'm going to bed. Do as you please, sir.
And with that, she stomped out of my room.
I'm retiring as well. Turning water into wine is impossible. Just do what you like. Good night.
I wasn't trying to make them angry or anything. Darn. I'll apologize to her tomorrow. And what's with these auditory hallucinations? Once Chris was gone, Telm and Ketchikak arrived. My room was a real hotspot. However, I was ready to go to bed after such a hectic evening. Having turned the Emperor into a frog and all, I could hardly say it had been an easy day for me. But experience had taught me how to keep my weariness from showing on my face.
What happened back there?
His face was graver than I had ever seen it. I guess he wasn't a fan of seeing the Emperor turned into a frog? Okay, I'm not sure anybody would be, sorry. It just sort of happened. I didn't mean to turn him into a frog.
What are you trying to do? Please, explain your plan to us.
Plan? The plan is to follow the Emperor's orders. We're just his hired guards. Something about this was off. Our job was to secure the Emperor's path. I didn't plan on having involvement in the planning.
Telm calmed himself. But that was a perfect opportunity, he said in a small voice. You turned the Emperor and his retinue into frogs.
I had no clue what he was getting at. He had said a perfect opportunity, so maybe he was trying to say that we could have traveled faster if we carried the frogs. He may have seemed sane, but he was still the right hand of the Abyssal Inferno. In my head, I changed his danger rating from a D to an A. You have a point, but I didn't think it good to keep him like that. As I've said before, that was a mere coincidence. Besides, one of them remained unaffected by the spell, remember?
Yes, but still.
He seemed dissatisfied, but I wasn't going to budge. You can't forget that people are still people. If we transported the Emperor as a frog, word of it might slip out. Once that happened, it didn't matter if we had succeeded as escorts. There would be no place left for us in the Empire. You have to consider what will follow this job. For now, we'll follow Franz's plans. I don't think anything will happen on the ground, but the air might prove to be a problem. Prepare as thoroughly as you can.
I see now. You're right. It would be unnatural if it was finished here. But what sort of preparations are we to make?
I'll leave that to you. I trust both of you, and I have my own preparation to make.
Understood.
I heard Kichikaka chuckling. I felt I had gotten through to him. I was sure that he was one of agreement. When those two left, my room was quiet once again. So far, the journey had been a smooth one, but this was where things would get tricky. Airborne travel was dangerous. Up there, fleeing wasn't an option, and you could crash. Even if you survived a crash, there was still a good chance you would be stranded somewhere remote. But now I had a countermeasure. I looked up at my flying carpet. It was hovering nearby, needlessly expending mana. Night Hiker, the relic I had used in White Wolf's den, had the drawback of only working at night. But this fellow was different. Let's get along. We can fly through the sky together. The carpet abruptly shifted from his lazy hovering to an intense charge. He slammed into me, causing me to roll across the floor and hit my head on the wall. There went another safety ring. Did the carpet have a grudge against me? At this point, he had done more damage to me than Arnold had. I needed time to practice. 3 days at least. I rolled over onto the thick, not violent carpet on the floor and thought about it. I was fairly certain we were ahead of schedule, so I considered asking Franz for a brief delay. The next day, we arrived in one of the largest cities in the Empire, Vedant. It was a metropolitan area, comparable to the imperial capital. The ramparts were sturdy, the town was clean, and unless I was mistaken, even the people were finely outfitted. To top it all off, this city had the only airship port in Zeebrugge. As their name suggested, airships were ships that could fly. I didn't know how they flew without using relics, but apparently it was some combination of applied science and magic. I found it incredibly interesting. But before we could take off, we had to make sure everything was safe and secure. Franz seemed to be relieved that we hadn't been attacked all day, so I bowed and asked for some extra time. My goal was to be able to at least rescue the Emperor. Should we begin to crash? My team could take care of themselves. They were magi, after all. So would Franz. He was of the Imperial Guard, after all. I insisted that this delay was for the sake of the journey, but didn't offer any specifics. Franz didn't seem at all interested in granting my wish, but then the Emperor intervened.
I see no harm in it, Franz. We have time, and Narina's tired from the long journey.
But, Your Imperial Majesty, it's dangerous to stay too long in one place. Fox could strike at any peril.
It's better than getting attacked in the air.
Who would attack us in the sky? And why aren't you already prepared?
Oh, there's plenty of possibilities. I didn't buy the idea that our enemies could manipulate dragons, but if our enemies really could do that, then an airship would be a floating coffin. It was hard to imagine that Fox Phantom could fly, but being what it was, I wouldn't have been surprised if it proved me wrong. Simply being on the ground made the city the safer of the two options.
We've already fended them off once. We can deal with them as long as we put our minds to it. I'm much more concerned about what might happen if we take off without adequate preparations.
I didn't quite get why, but it looked like the Emperor was on my side. Praise be the power of level 8. Franz glared at me spitefully. Being a noble must have been tough.
Be grateful for His Imperial Majesty's magnanimity. I'll give you 3 days, nothing more. Now go. Don't waste a single moment.
Everyone was gathered in a luxury inn that catered to hunters.
It's been some time since this has happened, but Krai is making a multi-day adjustment. He plans to make his move soon. Everyone prepare as thoroughly as you can.
After I bowed before her, Chris agreed to charge my relics. She got angry and told me not to dip my head so easily. She was the one who labeled me a human weakling, but I guess she didn't want me acting too weak. I left Telm in charge of the Emperor and went off in search of a training ground. I found the largest one I could and rented the entire thing for myself. I didn't want to share because of the hazards involved when flying the carpet, more for my weight than my non-existent strength. If the carpet sent me flying and I collided with someone, my safety rings would keep me unharmed, but the other party could get injured. Hunters had in fact been killed by Night Hiker, which flew at similar speeds. There was something overwhelming about the empty training ground. Hitting the dirt floor headfirst could easily be fatal. The sturdy metal walls had no cushioning to soften any collisions. Like a hunter preparing for a decisive battle, I glared at the carpet, who was casually sauntering around.
Perhaps I should leave.
What for?
Well, you can learn a lot by watching someone train. I'm sure even you have some techniques you don't want anyone else knowing about. Sir.
What a good girl she was. But she was worrying over nothing. I had no problems being watched. And if Chris left, then who would charge my carpet, shirt, and safety rings?
Chris tilted her head towards a man who was clad entirely in black and laughing suspiciously. I don't know why he came along, but maybe I should also take Ketcha with me.
No, I don't mind if you two are here. Though, I don't really think there will be anything worth seeing. It'll be dangerous, so just stand back a bit. Today I'm going to go all out. Chris was taken aback. Even I could succeed when I put my mind to it. I took deep breaths and stretched my arms and legs. The delinquent carpet's expression was calm, not that he actually had a face, but I was about to change that, for I was a man who had managed to tame the deadly night hiker. Of course, if not for my safety rings, I would have been another one of its victims. The delinquent carpet waved his right hand as though telling me to bring it on. I clenched my fists. Maybe these violent tendencies make him more valuable than a normal flying carpet? As I rushed at the carpet, I let out a yell that even I'll admit was pathetic. My right hand grabbed one of his corners. He rocketed into the air and I hit the ceiling, dying upon impact.
What's the point of this? Human weakling. That carpet is clearly defective, sir. You won't get anywhere no matter how much time you spend on this, sir. What do you even plan to use this carpet for? Remember, I'm the one who has to keep charging your relics. Just give up, or at least do your own charging. Sir! Just give up, sir! Why do you look like you're having fun? Ha! Please, put yourself in my shoes. Sir, haven't you had enough? I'm sure everyone nearby is sick of hearing you banging and clanging around. Give up? Quit already. Let's save it for tomorrow. I'm going to rest, sir.
The carpet was formidable. He was so formidable that by the end of the day, Chris was flat on the floor. I was able to get a grip on the carpet, but most of the time I was thrown off, or instead flung against the floor or a wall. And then I would die. Chris looked like she was approaching her limit. She was already curled up on the ground like she was about to draw her final breaths. But she was fine. Nobody ever died from expending too much mana. And noble spirits regenerated mana very quickly. I moved Chris somewhere out of the way, then looked at the carpet. Damn. You think I'm going to give up that easily? As though asking for a hug, the carpet spread his arms, I guess you can call them that, out wide. I dove at him and was immediately thrown to the ground. He was made of cloth, so his attacks were inevitably weak, but maybe he was even weaker than me. Lying on the ground, I looked up at his ornate patterns. I know all about it. I know that you want to let people ride you. The carpet didn't respond and just placed his legs on my forehead. I must have been the only level 8 to have that happen to them. But this reaction wasn't far from what I had expected. Since he was a flying carpet, I wouldn't have been able to grab his corners or even touch him if he really didn't want me to. But I was managing to do both those things. The only reasonable conclusion was that deep down, the carpet desired a passenger. But now I was in a tough spot. I couldn't practice if Chris was out of commission. My supposedly awakened magic powers hadn't resurfaced once since the frog incident. This left me with one option. I turned towards Kachachika, who was quietly standing silently in the corner. Unlike Chris, he had just been observing and keeping his opinions to himself. I still found the man just as suspicious as the day I had met him, but now I also knew what an accommodating person he was. Excuse me, I've got a favor to ask of you.
Dobra.
If you don't mind, could you perhaps charge my relics for me?
Dobra to Urzecki.
So I still can't get through to him. Didn't this guy use the occasional word when we first met? What a funny thing it was that this man who only laughed suspiciously was serving as a guard of the Emperor. Was he speaking some special jargon? Or maybe he was from a foreign land? I wished I had brought my translation staff. As the name suggested, that was a staff that translated words. The relic's proper name was Round World. If I had brought that staff on my vacation, I could have easily communicated with the cave people. It was an extremely convenient relic, but I hadn't brought it on this job because it was heavy, and the people at our destination spoke the same language as us. If it was a ring, then I would have worn it everywhere, but the world isn't that convenient of a place. Hey. Kechikeka recoiled for some reason. It had worked with the cave people, but random words apparently weren't enough this time around. And yet, it seemed this guy had managed to befriend Chris of all people. Maybe she was more open-minded than I thought. I began to worry about my training prospects as I was all too aware of the time limit I was working with. Then I heard the door opening, even though I was fairly certain there was a sign saying this training ground had been rented out. I looked at the door and was caught off guard by what I saw. In came a bizarre group of figures covered in white bedsheets. Kichachaka froze in place, deciding to be friendly only when it suited his convenience. The carpet hid behind me. 5 sheet wraiths ambled up to me and stood in a line. Still lying on the ground, Chris looked like she was having a nightmare. But I knew who these sheet-clad people were. I couldn't let Chris and Kichachaka in on the secret, but these were the people I trusted more than anyone in the world. Have you come to help me? My fists clenched when I realized things might work out now. The thief wraith tried to jump on me, but her skin, the bedsheet that is, was caught by an alchemy wraith with a large backpack. One of the sheet wraiths had struggled to fit through the door even after crouching down and towered above the others. Anne's giant wraith. I'm amazed you found such a large bedsheet. He grunted in agreement. Watching the exchange before him, Kichachaka was bewildered for the umpteenth time. Fox was an immense organization, so it wasn't surprising that one of its top members would have far more people at their disposal than the average operative of the underground. Therefore, there was nothing strange about a group appearing abruptly and receiving orders from the 1,000 Tricks. However, when everyone in that gang was clad in white bedsheets, it would be enough to shake even the counter cascade if he had been present. Kichachaka, of all people, had little right to feel this way, but he found the bedsheet elementals extraordinarily suspicious.
The guards might apprehend them just for walking around like that. The most striking member of their ranks was the one tall enough that Kichachaka was forced to crane his neck to say entirely, Sir Kiligon was tall, but that one was nothing compared to this fellow the 1,000 Tricks had called the giant wraith. He couldn't tell what was beneath that sheet, but its garbled voice made it clear. It was something intelligent. Kichachaka was already confused by the sight of the 1,000 Tricks training, but this was a shock magnitude greater. He had been curious how someone of the 1,000 shift, but the results left him wishing had never come along in the first place. He should have assisted on guard duty or prepared for their airborne journey.
One of the bedsheet elementals was calmly staring at Kichachaka. He could tell by the presence that the elemental was powerful, but he couldn't figure out anything beyond that. Whatever reason the elemental had for carrying a wooden sword was beyond the magus. But even more confounding was the joyous manner in which the 1,000 Tricks was issuing orders to the elementals. Kichachaka couldn't even tell whether or not this was some elaborate farce. He wondered how Franz would react if he were here. The elemental with the backpack large enough to fit a child and set their bag down and pounced on Chris. The noble spirit was unable to resist as she was dragged inside. Her state of mana depletion should have prevented her from even raising her voice, but she still managed a mangled scream. That, however, died down immediately as the sheets writhed slightly. That should do it. The alchemy wraith is an expert healer.
That was healing. That was healing. Even the most generous appraisal would still describe it that as an attack. Kichachaka was completely baffled, but the man of the 13th tail proudly rattled on.
The thief wraith is incredibly fast. She can go from here to the capital and back in less than 3 days. Now go on, I'm counting on you. The smallest of the wraiths became a momentary blur before disappearing. She had run off. Kichachaka had a fair amount of confidence in his visual tracking abilities, but even the thief wraith had been too fast for him. The 1,000 Tricks hadn't been kidding about her speed. That sort of instantaneous acceleration was a magus's worst nightmare. Even Telm, who could cast spells almost instantly, would likely struggle with such a fast target. Her getup might have been ridiculous, but she clearly surpassed the average lackey. If people like this were on their side, the assassination was going to be very easy. Kichachaka began to wonder if maybe these elementals were also the reason the mercenaries had never appeared. The magic wraith specializes in magic, and the sword wraith is, very fond of swords. And there's the giant wraith. He's very large. Kichachaka made no response. If I explain that they're elementals at my command, do you think they'll let me take them on the airship? Kichachaka gave up. He just couldn't discern the purpose of any of this. He couldn't even tell if this was a joke or not. But there was no use thinking too deeply about it. There wasn't a chance in hell that these things would be allowed on the airship. That was simply too absurd. Kichachaka made a small noise, then darted from the training ground.
Krai, what do you want the sword-loving sword wraith to do?
Your appearance won't be for a bit longer. Why not do some practice swings?
Practice swings? It's tricky, very tricky. I still have much to learn.
Gripping the sword through the bedsheet, the sword wraith began to swing with fervor. Nobody was as good at cutting as the sword-loving sword wraith, but unfortunately, that was all the flawed wraith could do. That he was content with those circumstances made him a troublesome wraith. I guess I can't convince anyone that these are my elementals. Even Ketchakaka left due to sheer disillusionment. The alchemy wraith slowly separated from Chris. The noble spirit was still on the ground, still as a stone. She had probably fainted after being forced to drink a super bitter mana potion. Thanks. About those sheets, did Liz mention it? The alchemy wraith made no response. Instead, she raised her sheet up high and tried to drag me under, but the magic wraith tripped her, sending her sprawling across the floor. Then she was flung away. The magic wraith had no distinguishing features. I just knew she was the magic one by process of elimination.
Leader, please quit screwing around during your escort quest. It's behavior such as this that earns you so many enemies.
I had no recollection of screwing around, but now that she was here, I removed my spent safety rings and handed them to the magic wraith. I noticed her quaking. We moved from the training grounds to the inn where my friends were staying. Citri took off her bedsheet, class changing from alchemy wraith to alchemist.
We're at the limits of Calmstone range.
Calmstone?
It's a recently developed magic tool that employs communications magic. They're based on sounding stone relics. They're not nearly as effective, but they can be mass-produced. There's one installed in Sir Killigan.
That's convenient.
Though perhaps based on wasn't the right word. Sounding stones are relics, so the only thing borrowed here is the outer design.
Citri pulled out a cubic stone, roughly the size of her fist. So this was how they had been keeping tabs on me. I took a seat and Citri went off to put on some tea. I felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I had been so perfectly comfortable I hadn't realized how on edge I really was. But having my friends around was a different sort of relief. With the magic wraith, I was sure I'd be able to finish practicing with the flying carpet in time.
Citri grinned when she noticed me relaxing. This job is approaching its climax. Once you take to the skies, the options available to us will be limited considerably. So I was wondering if there was anything we should be doing in the meantime.
Thanks. Let me think about it. Turning it over in my head, I felt a little pathetic relying on them so much, but I figured there was no harm if it resulted in making me look good before Franz and the Emperor. Not to mention you could never be too careful when traveling via airship.
Let me be clear, I still can't turn water into wine or orange juice or whatever liquids you might want.
Where am I?
Oh, you're finally up. Sorry about all that, Chris.
Human weakling? That's right,
Chris sat up, her eyes darting in every direction. Clutching her head, she looked outside and saw that the sun had set. Next, she examined herself. A few hours had passed since she had collapsed. It seemed that Alchemy Wraith hadn't just fed her a mana potion, but also something to erase her memories. I couldn't deny that erasing her memories made things easier for us, but I also felt that Citri should be a bit more hesitant about using those potions. What about Kichachaka? All he did was laugh, so we probably didn't have to worry about him. You're in my room. You collapsed due to mana depletion, so I carried you here. Are you all right? Perhaps due to the potion, Chris was still a bit out of it. Those purple eyes of hers were briefly fixated on me as she thought things over.
Just what were those wraiths, sir?
Are you sure that wasn't a dream?
It's coming back to me. That one wraith forced me to drink something.
Her memories haven't disappeared at all. Sutri was smart, but she always made little mistakes like this.
The confusion slowly faded from Chris's face. I remember. Sir, that's right. I recognize the person under the bedsheet. She's one of your party members. She was there when we negotiated Starlight's entry into First Steps. Sir!
It looks like her memories are fairly clear, and she even got a look at Citri's face. That was just a dream. Chris wobbled as she stood up. I took a step towards her, but an unspoken force told me I should step back. Before I knew it, I had retreated all the way to the wall.
Do you really expect me to believe that? Her eyes were narrowed and her voice low. I want you to tell me everything you're planning, sir!
It was a dream.
Huh? Look me dead in the eye and say that again. Sir, swear to your teammate.
Hey, you're too close. Get back. I could see her pointed ears twitch. I could tell just how clear her eyes were and discern the shape of her lips. Despite what the name Noble Spirit might suggest, they didn't actually look very different from humans. Wouldn't our roles usually be reversed in this sort of scenario? I'm still a man, after all. And Chris might look dainty, but she's still a hunter. I considered telling her the truth. I would still have to keep Telm and Ketchikaka in the dark, but Chris was a fellow clan member. I thought there was a chance she might understand if I explained the situation to her. Sure, maybe it was a small chance. I really didn't know what to do.
Chris smiled when she noticed me wavering. It was a cocky smile uncharacteristic of her. Go ahead, say it, sir. I might forgive you if you tell me the truth, sir.
Then the door opened suddenly.
1,000 tricks. There's something I'd like to talk about. Eh?
It was Telm. His eyes shot wide open when he saw me against the wall and Chris wearing a confident smile. He froze for a second, before nodding as though it all made sense now.
So that's it. I wondered why you brought her, but if this is the sort of relationship you two have, then... forgive my sudden intrusion. If you're inclined to listen to your elders, I'd suggest you lock the door at such times. My apologies for barging in. My conversation can wait, so I'll return later.
The door shut with a loud creak. Chris blinked, then looked alternatingly between me and the door. Once she processed what Telm had said, her face turned a deep scarlet.
That human's clearly mistaken. Teacher suggests that you and I would it'll be a cold day in hell when that happens. Sir, where did he hit his head to get that thought in his skull? A magically and physically superior noble spirit would never pair with some brittle human. Sir,
I hear we're not that different, biologically speaking. They're rare, but there are half-noble spirits.
shut up! The blame entirely rests. Just don't think this is over. Sir, Tion, wait.
With tears in her eyes, Chris dashed from the room. I guess the misunderstanding was more humiliating than being done in by the alchemy wraith. Wait, hold on. Could Telm have done that on purpose? It was entirely possible, considering the earlier sheet wraith discussion. What a good team we made. I'll have to offer my thanks to the Abyssal Inferno. I had done what I could, so I could rest easy. Tomorrow, I would show them how dependable the 1,000 tricks could be.
Just what is His Imperial Majesty thinking? Franz wondered. He suppressed the vague unease taking control of him and prepared the escort arrangements. He knew that Emperor Roderick was a free spirit. Franz had always assumed this to be natural for those fit for the throne, but now Franz felt that man was taking far too many risks. Franz could understand why Emperor Roderick was willing to rely on the 1,000 tricks. His innocence had been verified by one of Zebrudia's national treasures, and the rank of level 8 was an extraordinary honor. Though there was no sign of its presence, his absorbed mana material must have vastly exceeded even that of Franz, who never shirked his training. The brief glimpse Franz got of that man's power defied understanding, but it was his personality that made him difficult to trust. Franz was confident in his ability to evaluate people, and he had never seen anyone as flippant as the 1,000 tricks. His unwillingness to share information, his unimpressive bearing, his ridiculous outfit, none of it was befitting of someone trusted to protect the Emperor. Compared to him, even the overly suspicious Kichakaka or that misanthropic noble spirit were more fit to protect Emperor Roderick. Telm, meanwhile, was an exemplary hunter. Why couldn't their leader be someone who had their act together? Franz decided to write a letter of protest to the Explorers Association once this was all over. Franz wanted to crush that hunter, even if it meant employing the backing of House Ardman. But Franz couldn't possibly get away with that if Emperor Roderick had been willing to forgive even the frog incident. But he couldn't ignore the possibility that the 1,000 tricks had acted under the assumption that he would be shown clemency. Franz felt only fury when he reflected on that incident. What enraged him the most was that he had been forced to stomp on the Emperor and Imperial Princess. Just remembering it made him want to kill the 1,000 tricks. Something like that would not happen again. If 1,000 tricks seemed like he might bring the slightest harm to the Emperor, Franz would lock him up. If that man was the preterhuman artificer they claimed he was, then he should be able to stop trouble before it happened.
But Franz had more important things to be doing than worrying about the 1,000 tricks. The job of the Zero Order was to protect the Emperor. The rest of their journey would be on an airship. Their airship had never crashed before, and it was a much safer means of travel than the roads. However, if a fox found their way aboard, there would be nowhere for the Emperor to flee. That was something that needed to be avoided at all costs. With that in mind, perhaps taking 3 days to prepare wasn't such a bad idea after all. But should some scoundrel use this time to sneak in, it would be the end of Franz's life.
As Franz issued one order after another without end, a knight dashed into his room. Sir, the 1,000 Tricks has requested permission to bring cargo aboard.
Oh? What sort of cargo?
Potions, sir.
He has permission to bring personal belongings aboard if they're relevant to the job. Don't come to me with such trivial details.
That's what I told him, sir. It's just that he's brought such an extraordinary amount.
For treasure hunters, preparations were an indispensable part of the hunt. Having the right information, being stocked up on supplies, and many other small adjustments could all determine the success of a quest. For Grieving Souls, preparations were all handled by the alchemy wraith. Maybe it was just her personality, but she was absolutely thorough. I nodded with satisfaction when I saw the neatly arranged boxes. Then Franz ran up to me. He looked momentarily taken aback by the boxes before giving me a vicious look. I struggled to recall a recent memory in which he wasn't angry.
What's the meaning of this? We've already arranged for basic provisions.
You know what they say. You can never be too prepared.
You certainly can. Are you planning to set up a shop in Tauizant?
I couldn't deny that the alchemy wraith had delivered more than I had expected. I wondered what she was anticipating. There must have been at least 100 boxes of supplies, easily enough to last a treasure hunter an entire year. I hadn't asked for this much, and I had no idea where she got it or how much it cost. But it would be wrong to get angry when she had gone out of her way to prepare extra provisions for us. Calm down, Franz. These are in case your potions get used up. Besides, look, there's not just potions. There's also food.
We've already prepared food supplies. We don't need your help with that.
And we'll have these supplies if yours run out. The desert is a big place. If the airship crashes, your supplies won't be enough. Oh, we also prepared water. Danger came hand in hand with traveling the desert. I was fine, perfectly comfortable in fact, but the Emperor's safety ring wouldn't protect him from the sun's rays. I was pretty confident in my explanation, but Franz gave no response. I looked up at him, and when I saw his face, I gulped and froze in fear. His complexion was no longer red. In fact, his face was devoid of any emotion. He just stared at me like a statue. Had I said something strange?
What's going to happen?
Huh? Huh? My eyes bulged. What was he on about?
I'm asking you what's going to happen. Are you playing around? If you know something, then tell us. Report it.
What? Franz grabbed me by the collar and violently shook me. Grappling attacks were one of the few attacks that safety rings didn't protect against. I don't know. I don't know anything. Demon-eyed Franz didn't believe me at all.
Quit lying. I'll end you right here.
I'm no god. How could he expect me to know the future? What I had done was only natural for a hunter. See, calm down. They're just emergency supplies. They're for emergencies.
Who in the world would possibly consider these just emergency supplies? It's enough to open a shop. Do you really expect me to permit this? Do you think I'm a fool?
I think it's fair to call them emergency supplies. Eventually, Franz calmed down a bit. He stopped shaking me and let go of me. Nobles sure could be brutish. Sure, there might have been some excess, but preparing for emergencies was our job as guards. What a letdown it was to be treated this way after finally helping out.
The airship, it won't fall. It's never happened before.
Why, yeah, you're right. I'd give it a 90% chance that it won't fall. These really are just emergency supplies. Ha ha ha, I'm such a scaredy cat. I hoped he might forgive me if I made this something to laugh about. But Franz was as tense as ever.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but you're telling me that Zeebrudi is cutting-edge airship. One that has withstood monster attacks in every variety of weather has a 10% chance of crashing.
It appeared there had been a misunderstanding. Why did people have to pick at every little thing I said? I spoke pretty haphazardly, so much so that Citri sometimes made cue cards for me. Don't worry, friends. Even if we start to fall, I'll grab His Imperial Majesty.
Check the airship one more time and reevaluate everyone who'll be on board. Make sure there's no possibility of a crash. You've got 2 days. It won't crash. I guarantee it. Damn it, I won't let you have your way.
It's not like I want it to crash. Well, no point in arguing. If this job is a success, we can reconcile when it's all over. Now that this was over, I had one last preparation to make. I had to practice riding on the flying carpet. He had killed me a number of times, but I had thought up a way to get on his good side. I didn't know if it would work, but I was going to give it a try. The next couple of days flew by, and the day of destiny was upon us. We had been getting clear skies lately, but now nothing but dense clouds hung over us. It didn't look like ideal flying weather. We were just about ready to go. Telm, Ketchikaka, Chris, everyone was ready as they could possibly be. Franz stood before me imposingly. A vein on his forehead throbbed, and his eyebrow twitched.
Did I hear that correctly?
I'm terribly sorry. The only issue was that the thief wraith hadn't returned from her errand. I had asked her to run back to the Imperial capital and fetch something for me. I figured she could make it in time, but now I was starting to think I had miscalculated. Or rather, I hadn't anticipated the airship departing so early in the morning. The Emperor was getting ready for takeoff, and nobody was helping me argue my case. After all the trouble I had caused her, Chris was fairly upset with me. When I looked her way, she simply turned her head. Sir Killigan version Alpha just stood still, as per usual.
We've done more than enough to satisfy your requests. We've delayed our departure 3 days. We inspected the entire airship once more. We loaded all of your cargo, and on top of all that, you want us to delay our takeoff even further.
I thought he might cut me down at any moment. I didn't want to make this request, and I knew it would upset him, but I'd feel bad if Liz did all that running for me, and I wasn't there when she got back. I hadn't expected this either. Here, how about you take off, and I'll catch up later. My delinquent carpet was in a very good mood, proof that my plan had worked. He really hit it off with the blue carpet I had purchased for him. I had always assumed he was a male carpet, but now I was starting to think I had been wrong about that. I was sure that in her current state, she would take me as a passenger and let me catch up to the airship.
No. As much as I hate to acknowledge it, His Imperial Majesty picked you to stay at his side. You can't simply do as you please. We leave in 1 hour. If 3 days weren't enough to complete your preparations, that's nobody's fault but your own.
No arguing with that logic. Franz got up to clear me out of the room and put an end to our conversation. But just as he was about to open the door, it burst open from the other side.
What?
Oh. In came a thief wraith in a tattered bedsheet. I could tell it was the thief because she was carrying the item I'd requested. Overtaken with bewilderment, he stood frozen in place. The thief wraith passed him by, ignoring my baffled teammates as well, then stopped right in front of me. She handed the item to me, and I accepted it. The item in question was a staff that was about as long as I was tall. Whereas Chris's staff was wooden, this one was metal. At the top, the staff twisted into a spiral that coiled around a large round gem. The staff's glimmer might suggest that it was made of gold, but it was made of something very different. This staff was a relic. Even for the thief wraith, the Imperial capital was a long run. But she had made it just in time. I wrapped my arms around the wobbling wraith and gratefully patted her back. For a moment, she leaned into me, then silently departed, just as a wraith should. I could count on her when I needed it. The door closed. I had everything I needed. The carpet applauded me. That's everything. Shall we go?
Do you expect me not to say anything? What was that?
A bedsheet elemental that I command.
You think I'll believe that?
Chris looked at me smugly. But I wasn't going to budge on my story. I wasn't going to budge an inch. That was a bedsheet elemental. Nothing more, nothing less. And she wasn't getting in the way of the job, so what was the problem? I gripped the hefty staff my friend had gone to lengths to retrieve for me. I smiled at Franz, making it clear I had no further objections. At last, I can finally talk to Ketchikaka. As its name, Black Star, suggested, Zebrutia's state-of-the-art airship was an immense vessel, black as the night sky. The first thing that caught my eye was its large balloon-like upper hull, but the passenger section was also enormous. Lucia had taken me for rides on her broom, and I once held on to a dragon as it tore through the air, but I had never ridden a vehicle like this. The Black Star was larger than any dragon and was surely meant to be a testament to the Empire's might. What terrible weather!
This isn't enough to hinder the Black Star. It's endured worse. Our ship won't crash. I guarantee it.
The Emperor knit his brow and boarded the airship. That's not what I'm worried about. Once the Emperor was aboard, Franz came up to me.
This ship has a weight limit. Because of your cargo, we had to reduce our personnel. For your own sake, you better hope those supplies prove useful.
What? They're just emergency supplies? What a brittle-looking ship this is. It's like a balloon.
Your concern is unnecessary. Even if the hull is damaged, we have Magi whose sole job is to repair the ship. The design is based on a relic. Supposedly, the genuine article could fly without the aid of a magus, but that's nothing more than a rumor.
Interesting. You often heard of items made by trial and error efforts to replicate a relic, but I still wasn't fully reassured. And was reducing personnel really a good idea? Maybe I should have been more precise when I gave Citri her orders. I don't think we'd last a second if a dragon came for us.
Keep your worries to yourself. Dealing with attackers will be your job. With 3 Magi, that should be no problem.
Yeah, My immediate response caused Franz to look at me dubiously. Selecting 3 Magi turned out to be the right choice, after all. Except, I hadn't really selected them, I had just ended up with them. But that didn't change the fact that I was fairly sure Telm could kill a dragon without even leaving the interior.
So this is it. A fine vessel indeed.
Looking up at the Black Star, Telm Apocles grunted with appreciation. A cutting-edge vessel like this normally didn't accept commoners and hunters as passengers. This was a ship exclusively for the nobility. Flight was just one of the many things Magi were capable of bringing about. Telm had flown before, but never in anything remotely like this airship. He wasn't a specialist, so he wasn't familiar with the underlying principles, but he could tell the magical engravings carved into the hull had been made by a master. Some expert had taken a long time and pushed their skills to their limits making these arcane mechanisms. There were complex enchantments to strengthen the hull, reduce its weight, even repair the hull as the situation required. Steps had been taken to prevent damage from natural disasters, including protection against fire, ice, and lightning.
If relics were manifestations of ancient technology, then this was the exact opposite. This was a ship made with the best of modern technology. Telm had no trouble believing that the ship had never crashed once during its numerous voyages. Even for a level 7 hunter like Telm, taking this down from the outside would be a considerable challenge. A brood of dragons might have a 50% chance of success, but he could only make rough estimates because Ketchikaka couldn't summon specific varieties of dragons, but that was if they were attacking from the outside. There were strong barriers protecting against external blows, but working from the inside was a different matter altogether. At long last, Telm understood the strange behavior of the 1,000 tricks. The Empire considered this vessel to be infallible, and that had proven true thus far. In that sense, the Black Star could be considered a symbol of the Empire, and that made it worth destroying. There could be no better way to demonstrate the power of Fox, and if this airship crashed, and the Emperor died with it, the blame wouldn't be placed on the guards. The reputation of the 1,000 tricks might be damaged slightly, but with the capabilities of Fox, they could ensure that the prevailing theories didn't hold him accountable. So this was how someone of the 13th Tail saw things. Even now, Telm believed his plan had been flawless, and it would have been much quicker. But there was much more to gain from this plot, composed by the man of the 13th Tail.
The 1,000 Tricks was looking much further down the road than Telm had been. The Magus couldn't even find it in himself to be jealous of someone so vastly superior. There were still some points that mystified Telm, but he was sure they had their significance. But this was no time to sit around and watch. Preparations for the attack had been left in Telm's hands. He assumed this was done as a favor, a chance for him to prove his worth. While Telm was far stronger than any knight in the Imperial Guard, the knights outnumbered him. Caution would be essential. Telm took a deep breath and boarded the Black Star.
I'm explaining to you that I can't take what you value most. He's protected by the rules.
Hitch, he's what I value most. Not a goddamn chance, sir.
Oh no, I'm quite certain. There's no use trying to deceive me as I can read the hearts of people. It doesn't matter whether or not you're aware of it, you value Mr. Caution, and Mr. Caution has no sense of caution.
Chris quickly stepped away from me. Her face was red to her ears and her hands turned white as they gripped her staff. Well, this is a little embarrassing. I never would have thought Chris valued me.
Don't look so happy. Sir, this is just because nobody I know is here. Sir.
I see. So I'm more important to you than the Emperor. Chris began to tremble, her face flushed as she hit the ground with her staff. This was all the more refreshing after being told off by a god. Chris was always calling me a human weakling. I had no clue where I could have possibly scored any points with her. Maybe being in the same clan helped pad the numbers.
Big Brother Fox seemed to think things over for a moment before sighing. I suppose I have no choice. Mr. Caution, I'll take what you value most. However, to make up for my serious violation of the rules, I'll let you and all your companions go.
So that's it, huh? I didn't know if I should or shouldn't consider these to be favorable terms, but I had one thing I wanted to confirm. And what would happen if what I valued most was Chris or the Emperor or someone? Still red in the face? Crisped.
Then there would be nothing I could do. It would be my loss. I would let you and your company go. This is a fair exchange after all.
Now I knew I had won. At first, I hadn't any idea what was important to me, but Chris had changed that. It's her. Chris is what I value most. Sorry, but the Emperor comes second. I know, I'm failing my quest. But maybe this was all part of Big Brother Fox's plans? I was sure he wanted the tail. That might have been why he began to negotiate with Chris. He knew that he wouldn't be able to take from her, which would give him an excuse to take from me instead, and thus get the tail back. But nobody stood to gain if he took Chris. The tail was a chunk of mana that could be used to incredible effect, but I didn't care about that. At this rate, I was going to walk away with something I didn't need. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and prayed. This tail is what's important to me. It's what I value most, way more than Chris. Way more? Okay, maybe just a bit more. It's fairly valuable, and it's got a nice luster. I also like the ears that spring up when it attaches to you. If only Lucia didn't always punch me when I touch them. I opened my eyes. I saw Big Brother Fox looking just as troubled as he had been just a minute ago. Much to my disappointment, it looked like he wasn't going to be taking the tail.
I see. It seems, Mr. Caution, that what you value most is a carpet. Perhaps it sounds strange coming from me, but are you all right in the head?
And so, I did as I was asked and obediently handed it over. I had no choice. I was so nervous, I thought my heart was going to burst from my chest. As I hung my head, the Phantom rolled the item up and held it at his side.
And now our exchange is complete. I hope you've learned your lesson and never come here ever again.
I'm not here because I want to be. You guys ran into me. I meant every word of that, but the Phantom shrugged as though he didn't believe me.
It makes no difference.
It didn't matter how much he said his exchanges were fair. Their idea of fair wasn't the same as ours. All he really obeyed were the rules of the treasure vault. However, these rules didn't apply to us, they only dictated the Phantom's behavior. For instance, if I had the necessary strength, I could overpower them and escape without giving anything up. That, of course, was a moot point. We didn't say goodbye. The world abruptly changed back, and the Phantom disappeared. Before me was one of the airship's hallways. It was as though the vault had been nothing more than an illusion. Outside, the sky was blue and cloudless. Once I was certain we had made it out of Peregrine Lodge, I sighed with relief. With minimal losses, we had survived something very few people come back alive from. However, we had one tragic sacrifice in the form of a certain textile. I didn't know where that treasure vault would go from here, but if they remained airborne, then we would probably never run into them again. I just had to pray that assumption would prove correct. As I gazed out the window, I felt a hand grasp my no doubt mournful back. It was Chris. The color had returned to her face, and she was no longer nauseous.
What were you thinking back there?
I had done something bad to her, but I really had thought she was what I valued most. In the end, that turned out to be my carpet, something not even on my mind. The mind-reading skills of that phantom were extraordinary. Hey, calm down. That was definitely a scheme meant to drive us apart.
Do you think I'm an idiot, sir? Can you quit playing with fire?
I didn't think she was an idiot, but I really did feel awful about what had happened. I had a number of things to apologize to her for, and I wanted to do what I could to make it up to her. But, Chris, now's not the time to be fighting. We need to make sure the Emperor is all right. That phantom wouldn't lie to us, but any first-rate hunter would still want to make sure.
If you don't take this seriously, I'm going to hit you.
Following the map in my head, we made our way back to the earlier room. Knights, administrators, servants, magi, all sorts of people were collapsed in the hallways. These people were most likely not the victims of phantoms, but of Telm. Chris ran up to one and felt for a pulse, checked their eyes, and listened for a heartbeat. Let This Grieving Soul Retire by Chukikaj, cast by Artel Studio. If you are interested in creating your own audiobooks, please check out our website at artel.ai. Now, enjoy the story.
They're alive, she mumbled. They're still alive, sir. I don't understand.
Telm's magic was some of the best out there. I failed to understand how someone could be hit by one of his spells and survive this long.
Oh, was this the mana material, sir?
That would explain it. Mana material enhanced bodies. If you wanted to be fortified in a specific manner, you could. Whether it be magic prowess, strength, or the power to protect people, you got what you desired. If it was absorbed by someone on the brink of death, they would gain a stronger grip on life. These changes were usually slow to take effect, but with Peregrine Lodge's extreme concentration of mana, anything was possible. And what exactly was going on if I wasn't being affected, even when civilians were being strengthened? It was possible the Phantom had done something. He had said he would send us all back unharmed. If one of us had died while in the treasure vault, they could hardly be considered unharmed. But now that we had left the vault, there was nothing I could do to know for certain. I just wrote it off as a stroke of good luck. When we reached the room, we found it hadn't changed since we first departed.
"You're back, Thousand Tricks," the Emperor said when he saw me. Whereas everyone looked like they were on the verge of death, he was still maintaining an air of dignity. The man didn't sit at the top of the Empire for nothing. Have you resolved the situation outside?
My eyes swept the room and let out a sigh of relief. Behind the Emperor was my delinquent carpet. Good. We didn't lose anyone.
Trembling, Chris whispered threateningly in my ear. Seriously, quit playing with fire. What if you had failed, sir?
The Phantom only mentioned a carpet. Buying that other carpet as a companion for my relic had paid off big time. What mysterious creatures humans are, especially that cautionless young man. The number 2 of Peregrine Lodge was Big Brother Fox. On behalf of the Great Mother Fox, he was in charge of much of what went on in the vault. He looked scrutinizingly at the blue carpet. Humans valued all sorts of different things. For some it was items, the life of someone else. And some people even chose memories. But when that man had so many allies and a tale from Mother Fox, Big Brother Fox couldn't understand how a carpet could be what he treasured most. Humans rarely entered Peregrine Lodge, and nobody had entered since that man's previous visit, meaning this was Big Brother Fox's first confiscation. The noble spirit next to Mr. Caution had very reasonable values that Big Brother Fox could comprehend, so he felt safe in his belief that there was something wrong with that man. He was beginning to wonder if the rug was an heirloom or something when his eyes flew open.
"I've been had."
This wasn't it, he could tell. This was indeed a carpet, but not one significant to Mr. Caution. Big Brother Fox had been tricked. He let out a sigh of disdain. The airship had already been released. He had lost in a battle of wits. He never imagined that man would hand over a fake. Though the humans seemed to have the wrong idea, they had played by fair rules. It was a fair game of cloak and dagger, a fair battle of wits. It was his first attempt, so Big Brother Fox was still learning the game. But that didn't change the fact that being slipped the wrong item made him the clear loser here. He wasn't permitted to take revenge. In fact, as the loser he had to compensate the winner, just like Mother Fox had offered up one of her tails. Now Big Brother Fox was certain that Human was a wily one. His lack of caution only made him all the more difficult to handle. Appalled by his failures, Big Brother Fox began to consider what to do next. He needed a strategy. For someone to enter Peregrine Lodge twice in such a short time was abnormal. Maybe that man's luck was truly awful. Maybe he had some powers that dwarfed those of Peregrine Lodge. While that man showed no hostility to them, Big Brother Fox still didn't like the idea of continuing on in the sky. At the same time, he also didn't want to go somewhere beyond the reach of humans. It was an unfamiliarity with humans that had led to the defeat of his younger brother. It was a fine line to walk. His mother, younger sister, Big Brother Fox, all of them had lost. The one bit of solace in all of this was that the humans' airship was undoubtedly going to crash. Its propulsion systems had been demolished. The only reason it had remained airborne so long was because it had been caught by Peregrine Lodge. Now that it had been released, it was once again subject to gravity. That man had taken one of Mother Fox's tails. Big Brother Fox wasn't resentful, but he wasn't indifferent either. Mr. Caution was a fascinating individual, but not someone the Phantom was obligated to rescue. The Phantoms of Peregrine Lodge were bound to their rules after all. He still had to receive compensation from those two who had been left behind. Franz tumbled across the tilting floor. The only one at all comfortable was me.
Sit! We're going down, sir. Chris yelled.
My world shook. The furniture was bolted to the floor. The people weren't. I hadn't understood how we had been able to fly in the first place, but that didn't mean I was satisfied to see us falling. Not all of the passengers had been treated yet. Everyone had been confirmed to still be alive, but only a small few could actually move. Chris, can you cast a spell or something to save us? I asked.
No, magic can't do everything, sir.
Causing a commotion wouldn't do any good, so I sat down on the rattling floor. So we were going to crash. With my safety rings and flying carpet, I knew my life wasn't in danger, but everyone else was pretty screwed. Mana material could do incredible things to people, but you'd still have to be as durable as Ansem to survive a fall like this. Not to mention the fact that many of these passengers were civilians. Do you think you guys can make it through this? I asked Franz.
How the hell could we?
Even his banter was blunt.
It's no good, said a crew member as they entered the room. All the parachutes have been destroyed.
Telm sure knew what he was doing. If only I could have gone back in time and chosen someone else. If you jump for it just before we crash, maybe you'll make it, I suggested. I wasn't being entirely serious, but all the knights became pale as ghosts.
1,000 tricks, Franz said as he crawled across the floor. You need to save His Imperial Majesty.
You're a better person than you seem, I told him.
I'll kill you.
Now, calm down. We still have time. Maybe my magic powers will awaken. Maybe we'll land in water.
We're in the desert.
Oh, I've got it. We've got beds on this ship, right? You can tie your hands and feet to a sheet and float like a flying squirrel.
Are you for real, sir?
My brilliant idea was rejected. I bet everyone in Grieving Souls would have given it a go. I got up and looked out the window. Already, I could easily make out the ground below. Just as Franz had said, we were over the desert. I didn't know how long it would be until we made impact, but it was probably a matter of minutes. That sand sure looks soft, I said.
Is there really nothing you can do?
You guys really shouldn't depend on me so much. Honestly, I said the ship might crash. I kept trying to cast a spell to turn the airship into a bird, but that plan just wasn't panning out. All the while, I felt some very intense gazes on me. It wasn't easy being a predator-human artificer. I decided my first priority should be getting the Emperor and the Imperial Princess aboard the carpet. But if the Emperor could use safety rings, maybe I should have handed him one? Chris was a noble not weakling, so she could take care of herself. Everyone else would have to make a last-minute jump. The top portion of the airship was a balloon, and while I felt bad having no evidence to back this up, I had a feeling they might be able to survive depending on where they landed. Or maybe I was getting my hopes up. Then my gaze wandered to the window, and my eyes flew open. Outside were the sheet wraiths. They weren't actually wearing bedsheets anymore, but they were riding a comically large kite. It seemed they had managed to avoid getting dragged into the treasure vault. I smiled and gave a hard-boiled snap of my fingers. Well, I guess I can lend a hand if it's come to this. Lucia, lift the ship with your magic. If anyone can do it, you can. This thing is like a big balloon. I'll never ask for anything again, just save this ship. Lucia, AAA. Everyone was desperately clinging to chairs and desks. Franz was shielding the Emperor. Everywhere, I saw faces of people prepared to die. The only person who looked comfortable was the Imperial Princess, who was atop the carpet. How I envied her. The carpet hadn't accepted me. But her? Well, in fairness, the Imperial Princess was still a child. Then the ship was rocked by an exceptionally strong blow, like it had been hit by a massive wave. I heard glass breaking, the shaking continued, and then it all went silent. I no longer felt like I was floating through the air. For a moment, I stayed on the ground and observed the situation, but it didn't seem like another shock was coming. I wobbled a bit as I stood up. I took a deep breath. We alive! We alive! The interior was a mess. I guess the knights had never experienced crashing before. They had been unable to manage the violent turbulence and had all been tossed into a pile in one corner. But they were alive at least. Pressing his hands to the ground, the Emperor got off the floor. I heard a groan from Franz. Chris and the other Magi had cast a shock-absorbing spell before impact. Atop the carpet, the Imperial Princess was safe if frazzled. The carpet somehow gave me a thumbs up. What a competent relic I had in my employ. Plenty of people had been injured, but this was a good outcome considering the height we had fallen from.
So, what happened? Chris said between heavy breaths. Holding her arm, she must have hit it. She opened her eyes, her gaze was vague and unfocused, her voice lacking its usual vigor. It was almost like she was an amateur when it came to surviving crashes.
In these situations, you'll just get vertigo if you open your eyes, so you're better off keeping them closed. It also helps to crouch down and cover your ears. We call this evading reality. I timidly reached through a broken window and touched the sand. I felt a hint of the sun's intense rays. With so many people injured, I couldn't just sit around and do nothing. I braced myself, then stepped outside. While making sure not to lose my balance on the sand, I left the shade provided by the large hull. I gulped when I saw our surroundings. Before me was the desert, but there was more than just sand between here and the horizon. Through the shimmering air, I could see a large town a couple 100 meters in the distance. Beyond some trees and a low bulwark, I could see white buildings. There were shadows at the gate. With my eyesight, they just looked like little beans, but they were most likely people who had seen our crash. Fluttering near the gate was a flag of 5 spears on a yellow background. I had been shown this flag before beginning the escort quest. It was the flag of Tauizant. It looked like we had crashed in a good spot. No need to camp this way. I had been uncertain about this job, but we had made it all right in the end. I nodded to myself, then returned to the ship so I could share the great news. Hey, everybody! We've arrived in Tauizant.
Perhaps still suffering from dizziness, Franz rubbed his temples. I have nothing more to say to you, he said in a garbled voice.
Well, it'd be irresponsible to abandon you now that you've come all this way, I said, clenching my fists. I've got an idea of how to make sure everyone can be happy. The intense glare of the sun cooked the desolate desert landscape of Tauizant. Men were outside, laboring, coats protecting their skin from the oppressive heat, except now, they were still, their tanned faces looking at the cloudless sky through narrowed eyes. This had once been a land of endless conflict. While the influx of treasure hunters had caused the people of Tauizant to unite as one, the fact remained that most of their land remained unusable due in large part to the lack of water. You could easily count the number of times rain fell in a year, and intense shifts in temperature occurred as day became night. Powerful sandstorms assailed travelers, dangerous monsters adapted to the harsh climate roamed everywhere, and even laying down highways wasn't feasible. The only wealth in Tauizant was found in the small number of cities built around large oases. Other locales in the desert nation didn't even have enough food. These laboring men were members of an organization attempting to save this nation.
Shit! This one's not doing well either. One of them said,
Another awful day. These men were working about 10 kilometers from the capital, in a village built along ley lines. They were striving for something long yearned for in the desert, afforestation. Atop rust-colored dirt, lanky trees were planted at even intervals. However, they didn't look at all healthy. Their leaves were brown and withered, their branches thin as a person's pinky finger. The villagers wore dark expressions. Tauizant's climate wasn't friendly to plant life. Water was precious, and the soil was lacking in nutrients. The main plants that managed to survive such harsh conditions were the man-eating monster cacti. Even expert magi had trouble bringing rain to this land. The only hope of bringing about foliage came from mana material, which was capable of bolstering life. Its effects extended to more than humans and monsters. By planting trees along ley lines, the veins which mana material coursed through would strengthen the plants, improving their chances at afforestation. It was the only option left for Taoizand. The odds had never been in their favor. The desert nation lacked water, among other resources, and even technological prowess. Talented magi had been recruited to help out, but their successes were never more than temporary, even if it was all for nothing. Even if those directly involved in the greening had stopped believing, there was nothing they could do except cling to this last thread of hope. The desire for greenery was just that strong in the desert. Off in Taoizand's capital, there was some excitement about a conference, but that had nothing to do with the men out here. They urged their weary bodies to push on as they did battle with the sun-scorched land. Then, the man arrived. He wore a gaudy shirt that left his arms exposed. His skin was strikingly pale, proof that he wasn't from the desert. He didn't carry any weapons and didn't look at all like someone equipped to traverse the harsh climate. Compared to the villagers who spent their days absorbing mana material, and to say nothing of hunters, his presence was weak and out of place in the desert. This was a dull town established for the purpose of afforestation, not somewhere that often received visitors. But when that man, with the child and a beautiful woman following behind him, was shown to the organization's leader, he introduced himself as a level 8 hunter. "We're going to prepare a small shrine and lend you a god," he said, with a resigned but peaceful smile. "I'm sure that'll turn this land into a bountiful one." What nonsense! However, the designation of level 8 carried weight, and this man had the documents to prove his legitimacy. He was the same level as the strongest hunter in Taoizand. This man didn't look like much, but his accolades were too great to ignore. "Give her 1 serving of fried tofu once a day, and she should work for you," the hunter, bearing the name Krai said to the stunned villagers.
3 servings, said the girl in the fox mask as she tugged at his sleeve.
3 servings, Krai immediately corrected himself. "Oh, also I'd like you to bury this. Bury it deep, and really pack the dirt, okay?"
Krai, what a waste, she wailed.
Within the box proffered by the champion was a mysterious white tail. With the satisfaction of a job well done, I looked to the sky. Feeling the bright rays streaming from the blue expanse, I was perfectly comfortable. "Everything's been resolved," I said. Little Sister Fox and the fried tofu duty had been shoved off onto people who needed her powers. I had also managed to take care of the tail. Buried so deep in the ground, I was sure it would eventually return to the land. And to top it all off, I had gotten my hands on a smartphone. I was on fire, more than I had ever been.
"Sometimes I fail to understand your thinking," Citri told me. "We could have used that tail."
Little Sister Fox was one of the most basic phantoms of her vault, but her powers were still godlike in the lowly eyes of a mere human. I didn't know exactly what she was capable of, but causing rainfall seemed like something possible for her. And if it turned out she couldn't, she could still protect the village from its harsh surroundings. For a phantom, she was quick on the uptake. It feels good doing something nice. Not that we have anything to apologize for, but I think we should give those people the extra supplies from the airship, I said. I had heard that raising trees in the desert was brutal work, and those villagers were awfully thin. Most of the supplies were shelf-stable rations, but they were better than nothing. Perhaps there was still some fried tofu somewhere in those crates.
"As you wish," my dear friend Citri replied in a pouty voice, "something rare for her."
That tale's too dangerous for experimentation.
"And yet you gave it to the villagers?"
That's beside the point. I didn't give it away, I threw it away. I took the tail, and all the responsibility that came with it, and threw it in a hole. That's what you do with stuff you don't know how to deal with. You bury it deep in the ground. All I had left to do was think up a good excuse for doing this, and I'd be all set. I quickly pulled it out and tapped the screen. I was receiving a call from Big Brother Fox. He had been automatically added to my contacts. What could he want? I hesitantly touched the button, and the screen began to shine brightly. It was close to midnight, and I was hanging around in my room when I got a call from Franz, and brought Chris along with me. This was the first time this had happened in the past few days, but I had gotten used to his summons, and it seemed Franz had gotten used to the sight of me, in perfect vacation.
"Glad you could come, Thousand Tricks," he said. Then looked to his men. "Leave us be."
Per his orders, every member of the Imperial Guard except Franz left the room. As usual, the only people who remained were him, the Emperor, and the timid Imperial Princess. I had a few notions as to what I had been called for. However, Franz didn't seem at all angry, so I assumed they hadn't found out about Little Sister Fox and that whole mess.
There isn't much time before the conference, Franz continued. First, allow me to express my thanks for keeping His Imperial Majesty safe. We called you to discuss this job in the future.
The future, huh? That makes sense. Come to think of it, that would explain why Chris was so worried.
Franz's face grew grim. Because you brought members of the infamous nine-tailed shadow fox on this assignment, the Black Star, one of the Empire's most prized assets crashed. Under Imperial law, these failures warrant severe punishments. No matter your purpose, using His Imperial Majesty to lure out a foe is unforgivable, and guiding us into a treasure vault was without precedent.
Most nobles were imposing and had little concern for common people. Imperial law was strict, but I had heard many tales of violent behavior from nobles bringing commoners to tears. However, what he was saying was quite logical. I see, I said. But if you'll let me say my piece, I didn't use the Emperor as bait, nor did I lead us to a treasure vault. I didn't think they'd believe me, but if I was guilty of anything, it was incompetence.
Wait, sir. The human weakling went too far, but we ultimately made it to our destination safely. He brought foxes along in order to draw them out. In light of that, I think he deserves a lighter sentencing.
No. I just didn't have any idea they were foxes. Excuse me for being bad at my job, but I think it was pretty reasonable to assume the famous hidden curse wouldn't have a terrorist hidden among their ranks, and Kachakaka was very suspicious. Who would ever think that someone that shady was actually a bad guy, and wasn't something wrong with Franz if he and his guys had just accepted my team, no questions asked? While I shifted the blame around inside my head, the Emperor asked me a question.
Tell me, 1,000 Tricks, what do you think was our biggest failure?
The look in his eyes was dead serious. I could think of a number of major failures, but I had to watch what I said here. After some brief consideration, I was left with the impression that they'd get angry no matter what I said. With no better options available, I sighed and said, there were many failures, but our biggest was that we were very unlucky.
Huh? The hell does that mean?
Well, what else could it mean? I'm not wrong here, though I'll admit that doesn't mean that was the right answer. My desperate attempt at an answer caused the Emperor to knit his brow. After a brief silence, I saw him nod.
Bad luck is indeed something we cannot prevent, he said.
It is as you say, Franz chimed in.
Waha! Chris cried.
I was just as surprised as her. The Emperor was one thing, but accepting that answer didn't seem at all like something Franz would do.
His Imperial Majesty is graciously willing to forgive your mistakes, Franz said in a clear voice. Normally, this would be unthinkable.
That is unthinkable, I agreed.
Just be quiet and listen.
I had a bad feeling about this. I just couldn't accept that they would be so forgiving. Even if our troubles had been caused by oversights, even if they had all been resolved smoothly, they hadn't. I simply didn't believe they would let me go unpunished. I wasn't totally oblivious to my failings here. There had to be a flip side. This was too good to be true.
The conference's security is ironclad, Franz continued. Even an attack by the counter cascade won't be a problem. However, we are guests of this nation, and we don't want to cause a fuss. Do you understand me, Krai Andri?
Oh, that's right. I don't think they'll be coming after you. I had my trepidations, but I didn't see what else I could do. Atop the table, I placed 2 relics sent to me via the smartphone's attachment feature. There was a jet black gem and the bracelets Telm had been wearing. Franz became still and Chris looked astounded. These are the relics that Telm and Kachakaka were using. Without them, their powers are cut in half.
What? Where? How? No. When did you do this?
As confused as Franz was, I didn't think I could tell him I received the items from a phantom. I didn't know the details, but it seemed they had paid a price after losing a battle of wits. That's a trade secret, I said. The bracelets will go to Lusha, but I'm willing to part with the gem. It appears to be capable of summoning dragons.
What?
I had no need for something so dangerous. I suppose I would have handed the bracelets over if they demanded them as well. The room was still. Chris's look of shock made me feel incredibly guilty, but I still couldn't explain how I came into possession of these relics.
The Emperor's gaze was sharp. After a moment, he seemed to come to a decision and said, "1,000 tricks after witnessing your talents, I've decided I'd like you to protect and mentor Marina."
That made no sense. It felt incoherent, disconnected from our current conversation. What was that? I eventually said. I looked at the Imperial Princess, and she ducked behind the Emperor. If she needed protection, there was the Imperial Guard. In fact, Franz had been protecting her from the counter cascade. And what was all that stuff about the conference having ironclad security and not wanting to cause a fuss? Wasn't she going to the conference? I didn't keep up with politics, but whereas I still occasionally heard about the Emperor, I didn't know anything about the Imperial Princess. She wasn't known for some grand accomplishments or a famous beauty or anything like that. This might be rude of me, but she was really easy to forget. I hadn't even known her name until recently. Hold on then. Just as a thought crossed my mind, Chris spoke up.
Now that you mention her, I have to ask why you even brought her along in the first place. Wouldn't she be much safer at the Imperial Castle, sir?
That was exactly it. I didn't think the Imperial Princess was involved in politics or anything, and I didn't think she was going to inherit the throne. I saw no reason for the Emperor to bring her along. When he heard Chris's question, Franz's expression changed. He wasn't angry, but a shadow fell over his face. For a brief moment, a look of hesitation broke through the Emperor's usual dignity. I felt like I was looking at a bomb that was moments from detonating.
Then, as though disclosing a national secret, the Emperor whispered, "1,000 tricks. You are not to tell anyone of this. The truth is, Marina is incredibly unlucky."
Interlude. The Supreme Warrior Festival. We lived in an age of treasure vaults, phantoms, and treasure hunters. An age where numerous champions were produced by the mana material that coursed through ley lines. Talent could create immense differences, even between members of the same race. The efficiency with which someone could absorb mana material was sometimes referred to as their skill value. A single hunter with a high skill value was far more powerful than 1,000 mediocre hunters with no mana material. I don't know if it's true or not, but supposedly there was once a period where the world was almost completely devoid of mana material. The creatures of that time had a set limit on their maximum strength, and only small gaps in power existed among members of the same race. But I lived in a different age, one where those who absorbed high amounts of mana material were strong and deft and therefore lauded. It wasn't effort that determined the extent of their strength. Those of the upper classes regularly paired with people of high skill values, so that they might be succeeded by stronger children. The prevalent demand for talent placed much more pressure on the upper classes than it did on commoners like us.
Huh? How did this come about?
Lucia's eyes bulged. In an unusual turn for her, she had been distracted by the new relic I had given her and had only been partially listening. I didn't really know how to answer her question. Before I knew what was going on, I had been thrust into the position of guarding and mentoring the Imperial Princess. I didn't know how much truth there was to it, but according to the Emperor, Princess Marina had very bad luck. To make things worse, she was also timid and didn't easily get back up on her feet, and the Emperor wanted me to do something about that. That was, if you ask me, a terrible idea. How the hell had he kept his position with such a bad eye for people? I, Krai Andri, was a man who pushed the envelope of incompetency and misfortune. I was the wrong man for the job.
I can't imagine there's anything you can teach her, Lucia said.
But I can't just turn down a request from the Emperor, I replied. And it can't hurt to have him owing me a favor. While I might have been weak, Grieving Souls were anything but. They were also well-connected. Finding the right people to protect and guide the Imperial Princess should be easy for them. But enough about that. I got something really neat from them. What could it be? A ticket to the Supreme Warrior Festival, that's what? The Supreme Warrior Festival was one of the many combat tournaments out there. Just like the name suggested, warriors from around the world gathered to fight for the right to be called the strongest, to be called the Supreme Warrior. This ticket was probably so I could take Princess Marina to see true might up close. The timing couldn't have been better. My friends had all been interested in the tournament, and I had always wanted to spectate it. Tickets weren't easy to come by, but things were different for the Emperor. I was all pumped up, but I noticed Lucia was looking at me doubtfully. Now it begins. The fight to be the best. Side story, fortune and misfortune. It hadn't happened the way I had envisioned, but I had fulfilled my dream of becoming a treasure hunter. 1 month later, I was walking through the capital when I suddenly heard a voice.
Ooh, isn't this something? I've never seen fate pull so strongly on someone.
The eerie voice brought me to a halt. I turned and looked in the direction it came from and saw a shady old woman in a purple hood. On the side of the road, she had set up a table with a crystal ball atop it. She had wrinkles set deep into her face, and her bulging eyes were dead set on me. Was she a fortune teller? I normally would have walked right by someone like her, but something about her grabbed my attention. My bodyguard for that outing, Lucia, cast a suspicious gaze at the old woman. The fortune teller's job of divining futures and fortune required a different skill set from Magi. I shrugged and approached the fortune teller.
You're going to talk to her? Lucia asked.
Nothing wrong with doing that much, I told her. I didn't believe in fortune telling or anything, but things hadn't been going my way lately, and I didn't see any harm in having someone predict the future of our party. As I casually stood before the fortune teller, her eyes nearly leapt from their sockets. I'll admit I was a bit excited. What had she meant when she mentioned fate pulling on me? It could have been just a sort of catchphrase, but maybe I was destined to become some sort of champion.
Oh, this is extraordinary. Truly extraordinary. Perhaps I shouldn't say this, but, sir, you'll meet your end before long.
I just stood there, unsure what to say.
What the hell are you talking about? Lucia cried, picking up the slack for me.
The fortune teller, however, was unfazed. She didn't strike me as a fraudster and sounded genuine.
Ooh, the tragedy. 50 years of experience and a success rate of 99% has led some to call me the Eye of God. But I've never seen anything like this. Not even that princess could compare. How cruel the divine can be. However, it would be unjust of me to leave you in ignorance. You're a hunter, correct?
Yeah, but I only just started.
Sir, that job isn't for you. It's your false calling.
False calling. That was a new one and ominous to boot.
Sir, your fate is already a dark one, but becoming a hunter makes it infinitely worse. You walk a path that leads to hell. Before your lies one misfortune after another. A bad luck bargain sale.
All my tension left was sapped in an instant. What a funny choice of words for a woman called the Eye of God.
Why did you pick a job you have no aptitude for? She continued. Your folly astounds me, and your fate is black as night. That you still live is nothing short of miraculous. I'm tempted to say that all the world's bad luck has coalesced around you.
What a terrible thing to say. Except she was right about my lack of aptitude. In my defense, I had tried to quit, but I just kept getting swept along by the currents of my friends.
Whatever your divinations tell you, I think you're being incredibly rude. Lucia barked. She gave the fortune teller a savage glare. Do you have a grudge against my brother?
We hadn't been hunters long, but she had already developed an evil eye that could cause me to shudder. But it didn't seem to have any effect on the fortune teller.
Listen to me, I take no pleasure in saying any of this, and I won't ask for your money, the fortune teller said in a merciful voice. But, as someone who can see the future, I'm doing the right thing by telling you to quit hunting. If you don't, you'll be sent to an early grave.
Maybe I can use this to justify an early retirement. I heard Lucia gulp.
All sorts of misfortune will fall upon you as though pulled by gravity, the woman said hesitantly.
What sort of misfortunes? I asked. I thought it was a very reasonable question. All sorts of misfortune sounded like an exaggeration. I wasn't particularly talented or lucky, but I felt I had done my best in life. I couldn't buy the idea that that would lead me to a premature death.
The fortune teller looked severe. If you go out on hunts, you'll be hit by storms, lightning will aim for you specifically. You'll go out for walks and be assailed by bandits, but other times you'll be mistaken for a bandit. If you go in search of treasure vaults, you'll eventually find yourself faced with a phantom you'll be hopelessly outmatched by.
Huh?
You'll never win the lottery, every hunting mentor will reject you, you'll incur an enormous debt, and your friends will dirty their hands with evil deeds. And worst of all, you'll always fall behind your friends. I'm certain of it. Oh, sir, all you can do is wait for death.
Anything else? I asked. I couldn't help myself. What she was describing was just too wild. In fact, I was starting to enjoy myself. Was this normal?
Every prediction and projection you make will be off, creating frequent disasters. The desert, the forest, the ocean, you'll find yourself stranded in all of them. You'll walk into developing and roving treasure vaults. Hordes of monsters and phantoms will frequently attack you, and criminal organizations will come after you as well. Man and monster alike will despise you, and you won't be able to escape. Huh? There's even trouble with women? Sir, are you an avatar of misfortune?
For some reason, Lucia was giving me a very nasty look. Trouble with women sounded a bit hard to believe. Outside of my little sister, the only women I was close with were Liz and Citri.
Even if you never go to battle, battles will come to you. Drugs and poisons will be hidden everywhere they can. Your superiors will deplore you. Every action you take will be at the worst possible time. Whether you act as a leader or a party member, nothing you do will have the intended result. Truly, a one-sided coin.
Wait, hold on, stop. Just a moment, I said. This bettered belief. There wasn't a single bright spot in any of her predictions. It was like all the world's bad luck was coalescing. Oh, wait, she'd said that at the start. Still, I'll admit I had no motivation or talent, but I felt like she was going too far. I get that I'm unlucky, I said. But isn't there anything I can do about it? Like a good luck charm or something? Fortune tellers usually also taught ways to avoid the misfortunes they envisioned. But this old woman shot down that avenue.
There's nothing you can do. Your bad luck is a matter of destiny. That's not something that a good luck charm can change, but if you quit hunting now, you might meet a less horrific end.
Ho! This was one irresponsible fortune teller. Just telling me my luck was bad wasn't very productive. All she said was that I would die less horribly if I quit hunting. Hell, she probably wasn't even a real fortune teller. If I really was as unlucky as she claimed, I would have died on my first hunt, but I had been a treasure hunter for a full month. It was true that I had some bad experiences, some abnormal experiences, and had been hit by storms. But the fact was that I had overcome all of those, and I had never expected treasure hunting to be easy. But I'm doing just fine, I told her. I haven't gotten hurt once since becoming a hunter.
The fortune teller looked puzzled. That is very mysterious. With the bad luck that hangs over you, you should have died hundreds of times by now.
In other words, Lucia cut in, nobody knows what destiny has in store for us. Come on, brother, let's not waste any more time with this third-rate fortune teller.
Yeah, I said as she grabbed my arm. The fortune teller let out a small groan and tilted her head as her glimmering eyes stared into mine. It seemed she really found me perplexing. Still, she had gone to the trouble of calling out to us. Even if her prognostics were off the mark this time, it didn't change that she had decades of experience behind her. I didn't see any reason to antagonize her. Well then, I said in a deliberately cheery voice, is it all bad? Is there anything good? Like, do I have any strengths or something? It was a shot in the dark, but everyone was good at one or two things, at least. I wasn't good at physical or academic activities, nor was I particularly brave. I suppose the one thing I could brag about was that I had neat handwriting. If this fortune teller really was one of the best, then it shouldn't have been hard for her to identify a talent that I had yet to discover. The old lady looked at me through narrowed eyes. I waited for a moment, and eventually she said,
Sir, you have excellent interpersonal luck. You are very fortunate in that regard.
For a moment, I wasn't sure I believed my ears. What? I eventually said. Was interpersonal luck really a talent? That was just a form of luck. Sure, it was definitely better to be lucky than unlucky, and I knew how lucky I was to have the friends I did.
It's incredible, she said fervently. Just as you'll have droves of enemies, you'll have scores of friends. But don't forget what I just said. Your friends and your enemies will be swept up in your misfortune and experience hardships. Your destiny isn't satisfied to afflict only you. It defies understanding.
So, in summary, I'm an avatar of misfortune.
There's more. The fortune teller continued. Sir, your romantic luck is extraordinary. You'll be admired by many for no clear reason. Young and old, men and women, and not just humans. You'll be adored by all sorts. You're predisposed to troubles with women, and anyone who gets close to you will be another victim of your misfortune. But if you live a long life, you may leave behind as many as 100 descendants. It doesn't seem as though you have the inclination to, however. Oh, I wonder just what sort of star you were born under.
I wasn't sure being adored by the same sex and other creatures was really good fortune. But more importantly, I couldn't even remember having any luck of that sort. This woman was definitely just saying whatever came to mind, and that's when I remembered that I had once heard that saying vague statements that could apply to anyone was a common tactic among shoddy fortune tellers.
Come on now. Lucia said as she pulled my hand, she did not look very happy. There's no point talking to her any further.
You too, young lady, have a dark future ahead, the fortune teller said to her. You pitiful thing.
I guess I really am an avatar of bad luck. Chapter 1. The Gathering of the White Blade.
Master's going to the Gathering of the White Blade?
For Tino Shade, this came as quite a shock.
You didn't know. Apparently he got an invitation and the VCM's been running around with her hair on fire.
B. But Master was just with me, working on a quest. Tino hadn't heard a word about this. Even during the trial disguised as a vacation, he never showed the slightest hint that he had been invited to the Gathering of the White Blade. Invitations to said event were one of the top honors a hunter could receive and proof of their contributions to the Empire. Outside of exceptions like Ark Rodain, whose family had served the Empire as hunters for generations, it was unheard of for someone as young as Krai to be invited.
But the Gathering of the White Blade should have already passed. Looking back on his escapade/hot spring trip, Tino never would have imagined he had been bestowed such an honor.
The VCM was certain he would return, but I don't think she anticipated the event being put on hold, the other hunter said casually.
Tino, however, was trembling. She had been by her master's side and seen it all. She knew it was no coincidence that they made it home just in time for the delayed gathering. Even while being so far away, while causing all that mayhem, he had managed to fit the Gathering of the White Blade into his schedule. If he couldn't have, would he really have chosen to stop at a hot spring? After witnessing such a display of temerity and foresight, Tino gave up on even trying to read her master's intentions. If Tino had been in his position, stopping at a hot spring before such an esteemed event would have been unthinkable, even if she had been aware that it was being put on hold. Her head began to spin as she struggled to figure out what possible meaning there could be behind his actions.
Still, I wonder who the CN is going to bring. I'm pretty sure they're permitted a companion, the other hunter said, as though it was perfectly natural.
Oh, that's right.
The other hunter was remembering correctly. Attendees of the Gathering of the White Blade were indeed allowed to have someone accompany them. Most hunters did as the nobility did and brought their most trusted acquaintance from the opposite sex. Naturally, that excluded Tino from being a candidate. She didn't think she was so conceited as to let herself believe otherwise.
And yet Grieving Souls was a tight-knit party. At the very least, Lizzie, City, and Lucy were all potential companions. It wasn't at all hard for Tino to imagine the Smart Sisters fighting for that position. But did that mean she had a chance? If Lizzie and City got into a spat, Krai most likely wouldn't choose either of them. That would leave Lucy, but she was such a kind person, surely she would cede the position to Tino. She was, after all, Krai's younger sister. Tino gulped. It was shallow thinking on her part, but she wouldn't succeed if she didn't try. The future is something you take with your own hands. Her master had taught her that during their vacation, expediency was key. She would claim her victory before the others even realized what was at stake. There was a dress code for the Gathering of the White Blade. If she approached Krai in a stunningly beautiful dress, the meaning would be plenty apparent, and he would extend the invitation to her. And once he said yes, Lizzie and the others couldn't argue with him. Such audacious thinking had set Tino's heart pounding like a drum. But I know. Today, I'm on fire. Don't tell anyone else about that, she told the other hunter in a low, threatening voice.
Oh, okay.
Tino dashed off. She needed to get a dress ready. The Gathering of the White Blade was the most famous and most esteemed meeting among hunters of the Empire. It was sponsored by the Emperor himself and meant for a small number of hunters who had made contributions to Zabrudia. This was my first time, so I didn't know much about it, but apparently, there would also be lots of the Empire's bigwigs, and only the most accomplished hunters had even been allowed to attend. According to rumors, this had all started after Ark's ancestor fought a grueling battle and cleared the level 10 treasure vault that once rested on what would later become the site of the imperial capital. After that, the Emperor wanted to meet with said hunter and began this tradition. Apparently, the blade, in Gathering of the White Blade, referred to the holy blade passed down through House Roden. Attending the gathering was an undeniable honor, but I was looking to retire ASAP. I wasn't excited at the idea of attending an event where the Emperor would be present, and I lost all reason to go when I remembered that there would be droves of hunters there as well. Compared to those storied veterans, I was practically a bug. Not to mention, I didn't know anything about etiquette, so I always ended up doing something rude whenever I went to these sorts of events. With the event right in front of my eyes, I couldn't even revel in the afterglow of my vacation and spent the whole day trying to think up a plan of action. However, my empty head availed me nothing. 3 days. That's way too soon. No, wait. A day's passed, so it's 2 days. I was determined not to go. My stomach hurt. I don't want to go. My stomach hurts, I moaned as I planted my face on my desk.
Eva sighed. You must go, she insisted.
I go on a vacation so I can avoid this event and then it just gets delayed. Is that fair? No, it's not. It was all because Hidden Curse and Akashic Tower had gotten carried away during their little schism. What terrifying things Level 8s were if they could cause the Gathering of the White Blade to be delayed for the first time in history. Going on another vacation seemed out of the question. Eva was already exasperated by my first blatant attempt to flee. If I tried that again, then she'd be the one heading for the hills. I've got it. I'll make Ark go.
As I'm sure you're aware, Ark received an invitation of his own.
Of course he did. He was a Rodan and a regular attendee. I had already heard something about him attending a number of times prior. I don't have anything to wear.
I don't believe there's a dress code for hunters, but we do have something prepared for you. It's tailor-made.
Classic Ava, always prepared for anything. She brought out a finely made tuxedo. A tuxedo? I'm going in a tuxedo? No way. Impossible. I don't recall getting my measurements taken.
Citri had them on record. Some hunters attend in their armor, but, well, you don't typically wear armor.
That seemed like it would attract no small amount of attention. Let's think about this calmly. First and foremost, I don't want to attend. Under no circumstances do I want to find myself there. Well, I'm fine with going, but something's bound to go wrong if I bring one of my party members, I warned Eva.
You're the only one invited. You're to go as the representative of Grieving Souls.
There's something wrong with that. I didn't want to step into that circle of hell. The pyromaniac lady was going to be there, and that alone was too much. I desperately began to think of solutions, like maybe making Ansem go in my stead. Eva adjusted her glasses and looked at me.
You are permitted to have one person accompany you, she said.
Right. I'll bring Ark.
You can't.
I'll bring Ansem.
He won't fit into the venue.
Eva's tone was incredibly serious. I felt she was chastising me. I wasn't so sure she was right about Ansem, but bringing him along could cause trouble. He was a man with an overwhelming presence, and that might needlessly agitate the nobles and muscles for brains hunters. If running wasn't an option, then I could just lower my head and hide in a corner where nobody would look my way. I was second to none when it came to letting time pass by. If I had to, I wouldn't even discount groveling, which meant I needed a partner who wouldn't discount me for not discounting groveling. I don't know what this means. My options are looking slim. I guess I'll have to go with Ark after all. I'll have him decline his invitation, and then he can...
I understand Ark is planning to bring one of his party members. They say it's incited a fierce battle, Eva said.
Oh, yeah, something like that's bound to bring out the murderous rage. Strong, handsome, and a party free of troublemakers. What an overachiever. Some people are just born with all the luck. After working my brain so hard, I let out a yawn. I was tired of thinking about it. With so little time left until the gathering, I decided I'd just bring whoever happened to be free that day. I had nobody I wanted to butter up and no greater ambitions. I'd just read the room and spend it quietly like the country bumpkin I was. That way it'd all be over in an instant. That's it. I've got mirage form. I can hide my face and hide among the nobles. If I'm in a tuxedo, nobody will guess that it's me. Man, I'm on fire today. I grinned, pleased with such a good idea, when the door suddenly opened. It was Liz. I was glad to see her so upbeat even though we had just gotten back from a trip, but I was caught off guard by her outfit. Eva likewise stood frozen. Liz was wearing a red dress, one with a slit that ran up to her thigh. The tight collar and form-fitting dress perfectly matched her slender figure. The sight of her sun-tanned leg peeking out from the slit was undeniably stunning, but any allure she had was nullified by apex roots still covering her legs. She did an enthusiastic twirl.
Does it fit me? She asked bashfully.
It does. But what's it for? I said.
You can take someone with you to the gathering of the White Blades, right? I thought I had to pick an outfit that wouldn't embarrass you, and so I had this prepared.
Huh? No. I can't bring you. The dress is nice, but you're the last person I'm bringing to that event. It was such a flashy dress we'd be picking fights without even meaning to. We'd be picking a fight with the Emperor. She sure was, well prepared. Did she realize this wasn't a game? And how was I supposed to respond when she acted like her invitation was already set in stone? I was more than happy to bring her to an event, so long as it was one of no real consequence. Eva looked similarly taken aback. Sure, there was no dress code, but a deep red dress was still out of the question. Don't worry, you don't have to look at me like that, Ava. I won't bring her. And then, through the door Liz had left open, entered Citri. She was in a long black gown. In a sight quite different than her usual robe, the porcelain skin around her shoulders and collarbone was left exposed. It was refreshing on the eyes. Never mind that we had just been at a hot spring. I couldn't help but notice the tasteful accessory in her usually unadorned hair. Citri scowled when she saw who had arrived before her, but she smiled after looking at her own reserved appearance. She turned towards me and grinned from ear to ear.
What do you think, Krai? She asked. I had this prepared for the gathering of the White Blade. Surely you won't have any reason to be embarrassed by an outfit like this. Huh? What's that supposed to mean, City? Liz asked.
Naturally, I'm also prepared for potential combat scenarios. I may not be able to hide my arms, but...
Cheeks flushed, Citri rolled her skirt up to the top of her legs. At the top of her white, veiny thighs was a belt carrying a number of small potion vials. Liz was quick to respond to the obvious provocation. Chapter 2. The Preter-Human Artificer's Wall Spaghetti. I was feeling trapped. At times I may have acted rashly or flippantly, but I had never acted maliciously. Yet here I was. One night had passed since the gathering. I was in my usual spot in the clan master's office, slumped over on my desk. Citri had planted poison and the abyssal inferno had nearly destroyed the banquet hall. My friend's trespassing somehow got overlooked, but the poison was going too far. Just bringing something like that into the gathering was asking for trouble. There was no excuse I could possibly give, and groveling wouldn't be enough to make this go away. Citri hadn't been found out just yet, but Zubrudia had access to excellent investigators. They would find out the truth eventually. After all, the Empire owned a relic that could detect lies.
Here's the newspaper, Krai, Eva said as she handed it to me.
I usually just glanced over it, but this time I read it carefully. It seemed a gag order had been issued because I didn't see a single word concerning an intruder at the gathering. Instead, something else dominated the front page. A dragon attack in Zebrudia? I said.
I'm sure you are already aware, but it was shortly after we left.
Eva had dark rings under her eyes and had a weary expression on her face. And no, I didn't already know about the dragon attack. Eh? No such thing as too much bad luck, huh? I muttered.
Luck?
Dragons were considered to be the strongest of all the mythical beasts. Their forms varied from one variety to the next, but they all had generally powerful bodies and vast pools of mana. Entire countries were said to have been annihilated by lone dragons. The accolade Dragon Slayer had long been considered proof of a champion. However, dragons didn't typically attack human settlements. It might sound hard to believe, considering my encounter with the hot spring dragon in Souls, but in my hunting career, I had only ever seen dragons attack towns on 3 occasions.
Fortunately, there were a number of high-level hunters present, so the dragon was exterminated, Eva said.
I checked the newspaper. Apparently Ark and everyone else there had saved the imperial capital. House Rodan had strong ties to the nobility, so it was usually his job to deal with threats like this. But Luke and many of the hunters at the gathering had also stayed to guard the castle for the night. That was one silver lining of the gung-ho nature of hunters. It gave them the strength to fight off dragons. An elemental had just recently attacked a town. Then there were the cave people. Then the hot spring dragon. Zabrudia was having a rough couple of months. Was Citri's poisoning related to this? And then it hit me. I crossed my arms, folded my legs, and looked up at the ceiling.